It's Friday, and it can only mean one thing. It's time for the Movie Pope Show. And here are your hosts, Lee Suchek and Luca Suon. And now, let's make some noise for the gruesome twosome, the pedantic pair, Lee and Luca.
Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be taking a look at the Odyssey. And I know what you're all thinking. What took you guys so long? Well, we had to gather our thoughts because there's quite a lot to process here. But to help us out with that, we have Brendan and Bradley from the StoryProof podcast. These guys are great. Be sure to check them out. I will have a link to their channel down below. And I say that some of you guys aren't actually going there and checking them out. So I'm going to encourage you with extreme vigor to please go out and check these guys out and even subscribe to the channel because they deserve all the love and support that you're giving us. But today we are going to be taking a look at Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. And you know, unless you've been living under a rock, there has been a bit of a kerfuffle around this movie prior to its release and even after its release. Now, whether you're, on the side of Metatron or Asmongold, and you guys are thinking, well, Christopher Nolan totally, fucked it up. He basically went with a translation that basically, emasculated Odysseus. Or you can go with the side of MSNBC and just say, I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's a perfectly normal movie. Or if you're just in the middle of the spectrum and you just don't care, like the four of us here. But we have been building up to our review of the Odyssey over the past few months. I mean, back in November, Lee and I, we did a review of The Return starring Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche as Odysseus and Penelope. And then last month, we released a review of Troy from 2004, which, funny enough, Christopher Nolan came close to directing before Wolfgang Peterson kind of stepped in and took that away from him. But as a consolation prize, Nolan went on to direct Batman Begins, which, oddly enough, Wolfgang Peterson was very close to developing a Batman and Superman movie before he went and took up the reins for Troy. So everything comes full circle, isn't it? Now, Lee, this is a movie that I know that you as a Nolan fanboy have been anticipating for quite a while. I have been on the fence for quite a while. I was still on the fence when I was watching the movie, and I'm still kind of unsure of how I want to approach this. So why don't you go ahead and just offer your thoughts on this?
Deal with that nonsense, huh?
I mean, listen. I will say this right now. Like the whole interracial casting or whatever, it is irrelevant to us. We are mainly focused on the plot points, on what Nolan is doing with this movie and how Nolan is presenting this, this 3,000-year-old, epic from ancient Greece, right? That's retelling the story of a man who's just trying to get home. And at the very, at the very basic level, we can all identify and empathize with someone trying to get home because, to a degree, that's where we're all going. At the end of the day, we're all, I guess, burdened with a sense of home, a sense of responsibility, and this notion that we want to get back to somewhere in order to feel whole, right? I mean, if you look from a Christian perspective, Saint Augustine writes, our hearts are always desiring until we are reunited with you, Lord, right? Or if you just want to look at it from a secular perspective, it is the one thing that our heart desires most that can fulfill everything that we want in life. So take it as you will.
In a rush and you want to take a dump and you just want to be home, like that's kind of what it feels like sometimes too.
Well, that's the more vulgar approach to it, Lee. Yes, of course. But Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us into The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan, and we will interject at different points in this conversation, which I anticipate is going to be quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that's safe. So, actually, my first question, right? Because we didn't even chat about this too much or at all, actually, before this. But who's actually read the Odyssey out of our group? Just so I have a baseline for some of the stuff. I know you, Luca. Other than you, okay.
I'll take myself out.
Bradley and Brendan, have you read the Odyssey, or how much familiarity do you have with the "quote unquote" source material? Let's start with that.
Fairly familiar, but haven't read it. I know for us, we had one of the Englishes in high school was a big section on Greek and Roman stories, all sorts of mythology things. We read a lot about the idea of Achilles' heel and where that came from, and it's from this story. But have seen Troy plenty of times, but I've never actually read it. Just knew a lot of the story, a lot of the characters. And yeah, I see Brendan's trying to talk too.
No, I accidentally hit the microphone button. That was my bad. But yeah, basically, it was I think freshman year English in high school that
Yeah.
we
Yeah, it was the same
studied
with us,
sort of
yeah.
that. We read probably passages from the Odyssey and stuff like that, but like Bradley said, we didn't really like read it too in depth. I've got a couple different translations on audiobook that I might start listening to at work, but we'll see what happens. But I think the Odyssey is a very universal story because it is part of the genesis of Western literature in a lot of ways. A lot of the tropes, a lot of the way that we see and view and write our films and books and everything else today stem from the Odyssey. So we're very much aware of what's going on within it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because the Odyssey was written, let's say 800 BC, right? Like 400 years after the supposed events of the Trojan War. But even 400 years after Homer, the stories that he told influenced the ancient Greeks, especially when they were writing their dramas. I know the big one that comes up is Aeschylus, and Aeschylus, oddly enough, plays a huge role in Nolan's Odyssey. Especially when we take a look at what happened to Agamemnon. So even during that time period, even during the years of ancient Greece, and even during the rise of the Macedonian Empire in the Hellenistic period, Homer had such huge sway over the imaginations of the Greeks, and so much so that they spread Greco literature across the Near East. And he was even said that Alexander the Great himself, was such a huge fan of Homer. Like, he actually kept a copy of the Iliad under his pillow when he slept at night, and he felt like that kind of influenced him as he charged across the Middle East and into the into India to create what will be one of the largest empires at that time.
Yeah, didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, did not know that either. So maybe that's how Alexander the Great died, is he got a really nasty paper cut, and now we could blame the Odyssey / the Iliad on that. So whatever he was looking for. So but I did find it very interesting, right? I think for a lot of people, right, everyone remembers it from kind of that middle school, high school years, right? And I find that very interesting as we kind of start to see critiques about it and people talking about it. I'm like, a lot of people probably, read it then, but I would be very surprised how much people actually remember from the story, depending on how many years you're removed from school. So for me and Luca, we're probably about 15 plus years at this stage. So, but I did make sure I read the Odyssey prior to going to see it. So I know I did that. And then Luca, I believe you were reading, weren't you reading an adaptation of it?
Yeah, I read the Emily Wilson translation, so
Yes.
the one that Nolan used to influence his movie. Which
Correct.
funny enough, like, I don't know if y'all saw this recently, but Emily Wilson came out swinging, basically said, Nolan totally fucked up the whole thing. Like, that is not how I imagined it.
Which now makes it more interesting, because it's like people are complaining about that adaptation being used, and then the person that did the adaptation is now saying it was bad. So I don't know what people are trying to make fun.
I mean, listen, and you kind of have to feel bad for Nolan too, because he's catching flack from both sides of the aisle, right? Because before the movie was released, everybody in the right was basically saying you're stealing, you're basically mocking the heritage of the Greeks. Oddly enough, Lee, as you remind us every September, you are half Greek yourself on your mother's side. Yes. So everybody on the right was basically saying Nolan is basically trying to change history. And as soon as the movie came out, everybody on the left is saying, well, he totally missed the mark. He was playing too safe. And Emily Wilson, who has been maligned for being a leftist feminist, and the way that she translated the Odyssey. If someone like Emily Wilson's coming out and saying, "Yeah, you totally fucked this up," you're in a whole lot of trouble.
Yeah. And then for Christopher Nolan, he's just laughing to the bank with the success of the film. So,
Yeah.
but I will say this, right? So, and I mean, as far as who's going to direct this, right? For the Odyssey, right, from the source material, it does follow this non-linear storytelling, right? So I think very appropriate to have a director that's very iconic for the way he tells his stories to be directing this, right? So our journey, it truly starts at its final destination, right? We actually see the state of Ithaca, right? Ithaca being where Odysseus is from and where he's wanting to return. And Odysseus has been gone for 20 years, right? So when we're talking about longing for home, right? This guy has been far from home for over 20 years, right? So Odysseus' wife, Penelope, who's played by Anne Hathaway, she's trying to fend off all these suitors, right? These suitors that are going to become the king of Ithaca when she remarries, right? And there's tons of suitors. I believe in the books it's like 108 suitors or something like that. But I think, there's probably a few that stick out, but the one that the story ultimately focuses on, or at least with Nolan's adaptation, is Attenuous, right? That is played by Robert Pattinson. All right. So Penelope has a son with Odysseus, a son that Odysseus only really saw as an infant, right? So the little baby's never really seen the father, or certainly wouldn't remember it. But she has a son, Telemachus, right? Who's played by Tom Holland, who's having quite a streak for himself right now, jumping from the Odyssey to obviously the next big film, which is the new Spider-Man film. So for Telemachus, right, he, as well as his mom, still believes that Odysseus is alive, even though he hasn't showed up for 20 years. So he ends up going on kind of like a little mini journey, right? So he wants to go to Sparta to speak with a guy named Menelaus, who's the king of Sparta, to see if he could get some firsthand knowledge about what happened to his father, and just to try to figure out, is he dead? Is he alive? Is he imprisoned? Is he absconding? So he just wants to get some more information about that. So as we kind of walk through the intro, right, I know one of the big points of discourse that came out with this prior to the film coming out was really just kind of the dialogue, right? And kind of, it's a very modern dialogue, right? I know I remember watching, the trailer for it, and people just like were flaming, Tom Holland for using the term dad and everything like that. So I wanted to see from everyone here, right? Did the use of the modern language take you out of the story, or did it not matter to you? So Bradley, if you don't mind, I'll start with you first, just because you're on my far left. So I'm sorry, you kind of just got short the start straw, but I was just curious how you felt about the dialogue in this.
I thought it was great. Couldn't care less. In a very short answer, I will say, anytime you look at what people were getting mad about with this film, especially before it came out, it was literally like playing Mad Libs. Insert random answer here. People were so mad. Dude, it was just like about every single thing they could possibly find. Can you believe this is based off of a story? How dare they? Can you believe there's a black woman? Touch the pearls. Like,
There's
oh
a
my
Viking
God,
ship
shut
in
the
this?
fuck up. My God. Anyway, I will say, because Brendan and I talked about it too after we saw it, the only time in this that there was any modern enough language that it kind of threw me for a second was the word dad. But it's literally in like one scene for like 5 seconds. And there was one moment being like, huh, beyond that, didn't matter. I saw people fucking bitching about the fact that his teacher's name was Mentor, not realizing the origin of the word.
I know.
Just come on, man. That is the only time in this where the language was modern enough where it even caught my attention. I know that because I saw an interview that Tom Holland gave talking about specifically the use of the word dad. And then Christopher Nolan talking about if he were to write it in a way that would have been accurate to the era, he genuinely did not think people would connect to it the way that he wanted them to. And
Yeah.
I will say, as a theater actor, I see that a lot with Shakespeare, man. A lot of people are like, I don't want to go see Shakespeare because it's old and it sounds old. There is an unfortunate amount of truth. I mean, we see it in film where people don't want to watch a film because it's black and white. They think it's old. You want to make something feel old, give it the age appropriate text, and then people are like, what the fuck are they talking about? I don't even know half of these words. I don't understand. So it's one of these, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If he had done what these people are complaining they would have wanted, they would still be complaining that he did it. So for me, I could not possibly have cared less. I thought a lot of the writing was pretty good. The only thing I thought was a little funny is usually when you see versions of the Odyssey or hear shortened, condensed versions, I feel like there's not a lot of time spent on the ship. I feel like usually it's island, 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 death, island, and seeing so much of it on the ship, I was a little annoyed at how much his crew are just like, man, they love some mutiny. It's just like, God, they love some mutiny. Even after he saves them, they love some mutiny. And I'm like, all right, that's a little annoying. But that was not really the language they use. But no, the language, it didn't bother me any more than that one scene for 5 seconds. Past that, I was good.
All right, so 5 minutes of a almost 3 hour long film. That's how much you're bothered by it. Luca, what about you? Hit us up with it.
I mean, I prefer if they kind of kept things kind of formal, just because like when you look at the movie Troy, it's a bit more highfalutin. But I totally agree with Bradley. I mean, at the end of the day, you're making this to connect with the audience. And if the audience can't understand, me think if the lady doth protest too much, I mean, you are gonna have to alter it to where that bitch is just whining too much in order to convey the notion that, hey, this lady is definitely making a fuss over nothing, and then turning around and saying, well, that's the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? So it's just one of those things where it's almost like a necessary evil. You kind of have to sacrifice formality and and fidelity to the text in order to convey what's going on here. But
yeah,
it's not really a non-issue, just because there were so many other things that kind of just caught my attention that that just sat at the bottom of the pile, really.
Gotcha. Thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo the same things that like Bradley and Luca were saying. The whole thing was real small potatoes to me. I didn't really notice much of the dialogue in that way. As Bradley said, it's very much a way to try to connect this story to a modern audience. And I mean, what did people expect, that they were going to come out and talk in ancient Greek or something like that? Like, come on. We're just looking for things to complain about at this point, because it's the easy thing to do on the internet is complain and then just let it run. So
thank you. I agree with that. And now whenever I hear small potatoes, I just think of Yelena from Spider-Man now. But
dude, I have sent Brendan so many memes about small potatoes, big potatoes in the last few days.
Funny enough, you mentioned this. I went to Lidl yesterday. I actually bought some small potatoes.
Yeah, that would Bradley's poison poor Brendan's mind now. So he's gonna keep using small potatoes because he's slowly been thinking about it.
Well, on the bright side, at least Brendan no longer has to think about Professor Hulk. I know that was a huge issue.
Yeah, that's true. So,
it was a very big issue.
So, but I agree with everything that everyone said. Right, at the end of the day, to me, I wasn't expecting the dialogue to be a problem with me, right? Because I think to everyone's point, right? Like, it's about trying to help connect with the audience. And I feel like people, they listen to something like Troy, which I would consider like, kind of like old English, right? Like, I like Luca, you described as formal, right? It's something that like we're used to, but I'm like, that's not how they talk back then, right? You're trying to equate something that sounds more, I guess, like it's trying to
more ancient,
Yes, right. I think there's a confusion between trying to like suck you into a world and you be able to explore the world, right? And I feel like there's two different ways you could always do that, and keeping the dialogue more grounded lets the audience just enjoy more of what's going on, right? Because there's times where to people's points that I'm sitting there like, God, do I have to like open up like an old English dictionary to understand what the hell anyone's saying? Like, I don't know what's there. And I mean, it sounds really good on paper, but as an audience member, I don't know if that's supposed to connect me in any way what's going on if I don't know what's happening. So
I will say real fast, I have seen a real-time example of that happening where I went and saw a theater production of Alice in Wonderland, and I didn't realize how fucking British that damn thing is. There were so many words, and it sucked because so many of them were built around jokes. One thing I have always told people as a director or music director or whatever, I'm like, don't wait for a laugh or an applause. If there is one, great. If there's not, don't say a funny thing and then stop and wait for someone to laugh. Because if they don't, it's awkward as shit. And they did it all the time, and it never failed that there was a joke with a word that I didn't know. I'd never heard the word before. And that show, there were like 30 times that something was done on stage and I'm like, I feel like they're acting like this is supposed to be a funny thing, but no one in the audience understands it because we don't understand the language. We literally just don't understand the words they're using.
Well,
Also,
it's not,
to be honest,
well, Bradley,
it's a shitty production too, but
well, it's not even that. It's also about context as well. I mean,
yeah.
keep in mind, Lewis Carroll was writing, in the mid 19th century in Oxford, England. This guy was living in a university town, so obviously the way that he understands and processes humor is going to be different from the way that we in 2026 would understand it, or even someone in London at the same time will kind of understand humor much differently than say someone who spent most of his time living as an academic at Oxford University. Really.
Yeah, I will say there were a few lines I looked up with the script afterwards, and even knowing the context, I'm like, this isn't very funny. Like the cast members were acting like this was a joke. I'm like, this was a pretty bad joke. You guys should have just kept going.
Oh man, so I'm glad at least we're all on the same page with the dialogue and kind of that more modern language that's used. So after we kind of see Ithaca, right, we transition over to really our hero Odysseus, right, the hero of the Trojan War, who is played by Matt Damon. And he's suffering from amnesia, right? So we see him, he's on an island with the nymph Calypso. And Calypso's been feeding him these lotus flowers, right? Which, I kind of appreciated, the use of the lotus flowers, right? We'll talk more about the journey when we end the journey, but, kind of good to see kind of some of that mashup of some of the elements to try to capture as much as you can from the original story to kind of fit into a 3-hour long film. Because Odysseus is struggling to remember his past, it's because of this lotus flowers that he's been eating. So Calypso decides to stop feeding him the flowers, and I kind of like how you hear like the thunder rumbling, right? That's her sign that she's kind of screwing up. And I like how the gods have a very, I would say, passive way of injecting them into the story, right? Because really, I think Athena is really the only god that appears on screen. At least that I could think of. And anyone, please correct me if I'm wrong with that. But I like how a lot of the gods kind of have this passive way of injecting themselves into the story for that. So once Calypso stops feeding him the lotus flowers, this is where Odysseus kind of starts to remember everything that's happened from kind of the siege of Troy up until his return to Ithaca, so spoilers. But that's pretty much what we're about to get into. So before we get into the journey, right, I want to take an opportunity to just talk about like the casting in this and just see if any of these characters really stuck out to you guys, because this is really a big cast, right? You got Matt Damon in it, you got Anne Hathaway in as Penelope, right? I know people have been kind of up and down on Tom Holland because of seeing him so much in other stuff. You have Robert Pattinson, right, as Antinous, and then I know there's definitely some Zendaya. I'm tired of seeing her in every movie type of thing. But But there's a lot of characters out there. So what do you think of the performances, right, as far as from our main cast? And is there any minor characters that maybe stuck out to you for how well they portrayed some of these people? Luke, I'll start with you. So we'll mix up a little bit. So,
Well, I will refer you back to The Return that we reviewed back in November, right? And I will say that the way that Ralph Fiennes portrays Odysseus as this weary, jaded man who's basically suffering from PTSD is phenomenal, right? You could see the sadness in his eyes, the stress of having to endure 20 years of wandering and having to come home, and he's not even coming home in a triumphal manner. He's very much ashamed of who he is, and I think I told you this too when we did our review, was that when he's having that discussion with Eumaeus around that fire, everybody's just talking about, oh, Odysseus is like this great guy and he did all these great things and he slayed like 100 Trojans in one day, and Odysseus is just sitting there, is like, yeah, we just had to destroy it because if we kept it, it would have driven us mad. And it's so moving the way that he plays it, because he's not playing him as like this grandiose guy, because in the story of the Odyssey, Odysseus is very much a man who's guilty of the sin of hubris, right? But here, this is a man who's pretty much been chastened and and is pretty much just eaten more than his fair share of humble pie.
yes.
Now Matt Damon, I will say this, is a good actor. And I will even say the way that he portrays Odysseus is he portrays him as someone who genuinely cares about his men.
Yes.
But I didn't get the same sense of sadness and trauma that I got from the way that Ralph Fiennes plays him. Right now, granted, not everyone is going to be playing Odysseus the same way. It's like Hamlet, and no one actor is going to play Hamlet the same way. But I kind of feel like the way that Damon plays him, it's more action oriented. And granted, that's the way that Nolan is directing the story. So obviously, you're going to be more action oriented. But even in those small moments, even in those moments when he's recounting it, I have a hard time buying the fact that he feels guilty about the stuff he's done. It's almost like he's compartmentalized everything that happened during the war, and he just kind of just forgets about it. And if he happens to recall, it's like, oh, I did this. We burned the city of Troy. But anyway, then we got into the boat, and then we ended up going to this island here. Whereas Fiennes, he kind of just plays him with more subtlety, but you could feel every weight in the words. Like this is a guy who, I mean, I will say this: Damon looks the same as he did. He's essentially the same guy for me when he comes back to Ithaca, right? Fiennes plays him more as a guy who you kind of have to wonder, what was he like before he went to Troy? It's kind of like in the Peaky Blinders when Grace asks Aunt Polly what was Tommy like before the war, and Polly said, he used to laugh a lot, but now he doesn't. So it kind of makes you wonder, well, what were they like before the war? Because what we've got instead are these men who are broken from suffering a traumatic experience during the conflict. That was the main thing I focused on. Anne Hathaway, I think she's a great actress, but that one scene where she actually kind of snaps at Telemachus and says, I've been sitting on the throne for 20 years, and yet somehow just because you have like a few whiskers on your cheek, that makes you more qualified than me to be king. I'm like, okay, never mind that. I was rooting for you, Penelope, up until that point. Like, you know what? I'm good. You know what? That's fine. And I mentioned this to you when we saw the movie, Lee, but I think the one actor who actually knocked out of the park was Robert Pattinson as Antinous.
Yes.
Like he played him as a slimy character. So like he did a phenomenal job. I say he did better than Anne Hathaway and Matt Damon. But he's doing it in a way that kind of evokes like the worst reactions out of us, right? Because if Matt Damon is supposed to evoke like the best reactions out of us, I mean, if I'm being charitable, he sort of did that, but it's not as much as that they were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I would phrase it. John Leguizamo as Eumaeus, I was like, why even bother having him in there? Like he's not doing anything really.
It's a comic relief.
Well, it depends on, well, yeah, if it's Greek comedy. I know you Greeks have a very weird sense of comedic timing.
Okay, I did laugh at that sequence, right, where he's like, he's blind, right? So spoiler alert, Eumaeus is blind, right? We'll get to him later on. I did like the part where it's like at the final part, and he's like, "Did we win?" And I kind of laughed. I laughed at that because I thought that was funny because he doesn't know. So.
Well, another thing that I will add, too, is I kind of wish we saw Agamemnon's face, because every time we see Agamemnon, he's either wearing that helmet, or we just see the back of his head before he gets killed. And I'm like, I would like to know what Agamemnon looks like, because we see a lot of his brother, Menelaus. He's just running around the Spartan countryside shooting pheasants, but we never really see what's going on with Agamemnon, you know?
I cannot possibly agree less. I could not disagree harder. I'm pissed that we heard his voice. I did not want a voice. I wanted him to be a faceless, voiceless symbol. I will say, when we heard his voice, Brendan even heard me go, fuck, in the theater, because I was hoping we wouldn't do it. But then I was like, you know what? The way they did his voice and the writing for him was so good that I was like, okay, I can roll with it. But I loved when they open the gates of Troy and you see that monstrous motherfucker there. I don't need that to be a man. That's a symbol. I don't give a shit about the man. Look at that badass motherfucker. Are you kidding me? I don't need to see his face. I don't need to hear him talk. That dude's a unit. And then he gets stabbed. But
hold on, Bradley. So
he was horror farming right there, man. He don't fuck around.
I'm sorry, guys. This guy is supposed to be the commander of the Greek army, right? Like he rallies, all the kings and nobles of Greece to go to Troy to fight this 10-year war. How the fuck does he only have 10 ships with him for a 10-year war? It's just like in Dunkirk, where you're expecting to see 40,000 men on the beach, and instead everybody's just queuing up at the beach side. That part really, really drove me nuts afterwards. I mean, fine. I mean, yes, he is supposed to be like the faceless symbol of an authority figure whose only real motive for going to war is, just like in the movie Troy, to basically create like a hegemony over the Aegean. All right, that part I can understand. Yeah. But how the fuck is it that only 10 ships answered the call? Like, where the fuck was everybody else?
It's enough. Brendan. Well, I'll have you chime in here with some of the characters if there's anything you wanted to add
on. I think what Robert Pattinson did was really good. I had a hard time taking the character completely seriously. It's because of the writing. He's written to be so pathetic and slimy that it's a bit over the top to me.
Dude, we talked about it, but when they're having the fight towards the end, and the dude's throwing in the equipment, shields, grab the shields. Oh my god, swords! God, the spears! I'm like, what the fuck is happening right now?
But again, I do want to emphasize Robert Pattinson did very well with what he was given. It's one of the weaker parts of the script to me. I understand what Nolan was doing with it, but it bothers me just how pathetic and slimy the character is.
They could have just named him Weasel and you'd be like, all right, that tracks.
I mean, listen, he was a draft dodger, so that tracks.
Yeah, there's some interesting things that pop up with this character that I thought was interesting for sure.
I actually really liked what John Leguizamo did in this movie. I don't see him as just the comic relief. I thought he had a very solid dignity to him as just a sort of old guard servant to Odysseus, who is just trying to hold everything together on his level, and try to serve Penelope and Telemachus as well as he is.
I will also say I really like that the three main people that we follow in Ithaca during this time is the son of Odysseus, the wife of Odysseus, and possibly one of the better friends. And it's like one wanted their husband back, one wanted their father back. And at the same point in time, I feel like John Leguizamo's character was one who was like, we need our king back.
Yes.
Like he was the one
Yep.
who was like, it wasn't just a personal thing. It wasn't just I want my friend back. He was the one who was constantly saying like, look at what has happened to Ithaca while he's been gone. Look at how far we've come. Look at what's happened while he's been gone. We need our king back. That's why I'm like, and it's also I will admit I'm biased because John Leguizamo could be cast in anything, and I'm like, fuck yeah, John Leguizamo. But I'm a little biased. I will openly admit that. But I mean, I will say the stuff with him and his dogs being murdered, I'm like, this is maybe a little too dark for me. I could have, and it was at the very end. I was like, I could have done without that part. But
we'll
but
talk
yeah,
about dark. We'll talk about dark later, Bradley. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. I got
But
some
yeah,
stories to tell.
I didn't want to interrupt Brendan, but that was I will say that I really liked it. It was like it was personal. It was personal for him, but it was so much more than that. Okay, go.
And then the only other performance that really kind of stands out to me was Hamish Patel, his Odysseus' second in command. I thought he was really good as well in that one. But
really, that's it. That's all you got. Are we going to talk about how the fuck they did camera work to make Ryan Hurst look like a normal heighted person? They have Ryan Hurst, who is 6'6", next to little baby Tom Holland, and they managed to make it look like they are of similar heights. Are you shitting me? This is like in the West Wing when Oliver Platt stood next to fucking Martin Sheen, and they made them look normal. They would look like me next to a kid. What the shit? Ryan Hurst. Poor Ryan Hurst. I love him so much. This dude gets murdered or crippled in every single thing I have ever seen him in. And I was like, why can't Ryan Hurst catch a break? Like, really? This poor guy just dies and everything.
I mean, even Sean B got caught a break once in a while.
You're right. Enjoy.
I mean, to be fair, he's playing mentor. If there's anything we know from history, it's that mentors have to die.
Yeah, but they also only gave him like 3 lines. I'm like, man, I just like Ryan Hurst. Stop killing him. I do like. I don't know if you guys are any other Walking Dead fans in here, but I really liked that they had Samantha Morton, who plays Alpha. They had Ryan Hurst, who plays Beta. So you've got 2 of the big bads in The Walking Dead in this, and then Corey Hawkins is I guess like the second in command type character to Robert Pattinson. He was in The Walking Dead as well for a hot minute. I was like, it was kind of cool to see so many Walking Dead alums in this. There's probably more, but those are the ones that really hit me. But yeah, I will say when Charlize Theron showed up, I looked at Brendan. I'm like, did you know she was in this? I was like, she was somehow the big name in this because they had casting announcements for this movie every 5 minutes for like a year. I mean, it's just a laundry list of people, and she was one that I was like, I completely missed that she was in this. But I will definitely second what Brendan said about Hamish Patel. He, despite how mutiny happy he was, I really enjoyed him as a character. John Bernthal is also another one of those I'm a bit biased towards. I like him in pretty much anything. A lot of people, were complaining about Lupita Nyong'o in this. I thought she was great. I mean, she's not in it as much.
Yeah,
I thought
for the 3 minutes of screen time she has.
Yeah, and then Elliot Page. Everyone was so upset about that. I thought it worked. I wouldn't have thought twice about it. I don't think there's any casting choice in this where I'm like, no, maybe not. The only one that I was a little like, I didn't know Mia Goth was in this.
Yes.
Mia Goth, the only thing with her is, and I don't mean this in a bad way, she just has such a unique look about her that I struggle seeing her in anything where she is not the focus. Like there's just something about her that draws your attention, maybe in not a good of way. But yeah, didn't know she was in this. And yeah, I mean, Tom Holland, I know a lot of people do say he's in a lot, but it kills me. Everyone says that. Everyone says every time they see someone in 2 or 3 things in a year, they're like, this person's casting too much. Well, then stop going to see all their fucking movies, dude. Stop making them so bankable. Like, what the fuck, man? But I do think age-wise is a very good person for this because he still looks boyish enough.
Yep.
Like he definitely still plays. God, what's that dude who was in shit. That dude, he was in like the Maze Runner. He was in Game of Thrones. He was in yeah. Now I'm sounding like crazy, but he's this dude who was playing a 15-year-old kid well into his 30s because he's just so. He was Reed, the young Reed boy in Game of Thrones that got stabbed by skeletons. Brendan's looking at me like I'm crazy.
Thomas Brody Sangster.
Sure. I knew you would know his first
The
and
little
last
kid
name.
from Love Actually.
Oh yeah, the one that was
it.
Newt Maze Runner, right?
Yes, that
Yeah.
guy. Even in Maze Runner, I think he was in his 30s. Like, he looks like such a boy, but he's so not a boy. You know, Tom Holland, I think was good in this. I think his character was written pretty well to be a little bit of a weenie, but kind of comes around. I wish he had a bit more of a coming around at the end. You know, at the end when they're like, "He's the king. He's gonna lead us." I'm a little bit like, "Did he earn this?" All right, Brendan's pointing that he has something to say.
I did have Bradley. I also mentioned her. Samantha Morton as Cersei was phenomenal.
Yes.
In this, like I know we're going to talk about her a little bit more later, so I wasn't going to say too much, but she is phenomenal. She is one of the standout performances in this film.
Yes.
You want to know why? That's what you get when you hire a motherfucking stage actor.
That was when I added the minor character bit into it, to me, and I was hoping I would have more platform for it, but that's fine, Brendan. I'm glad you brought her up, because to me, she killed it in what little screen time she had, right? Like, that was, so cool. Like, just the way that, like, she sees the soldiers and, like, she freaks out. Like, you could tell she had this, like, negative reaction, and you have to wonder, like, is she just purely acting this because she knows, or did she have this bad experience, and that's what's kind of created this around her? I just thought that she did such a good job with what she had.
Dude, she's so talented. Everything I've seen her in, she's been
absolutely enjoy that. So
just incredible.
All right. So back to as we're going through our story, right? So we have Odysseus, right? He's starting to recall what happened, and we start to understand or learn, kind of what's happened since Troy, right? So we find out that Odysseus is the one that creates the infamous Trojan horse, right? A term I'm sure people have heard plenty of times. Maybe people didn't know the origin of it, right? So just like Mentor earlier, we talked about, right? Trojan horse, something that came from this, right? And, the Trojan horse, right? It has soldiers inside of it, right? So the whole purpose is that they want to bring this Trojan horse inside the walls of Troy. They kind of spring a trap, right? So that is the purpose of the Trojan horse. And I realized I had to kind of explain that, because as I was thinking about, like, if no one has context for this film, right, I shouldn't just assume people know, like, hey, Trojan horse, Troy, all this stuff. So if I miss something that's important, please feel free to add it in, because I was like, I think I made this maybe a little bit too much for people that I'm assuming is all seeing this. And that's not fair to people. So, but we have this, Trojan horse, right, that they're wanting to bring in within the walls of Troy, right? So, and this is ultimately to end really a 10-year-long war, right? That's how long this has been happening, right? So it's a very protracted war, right? So we have the Trojan horse that's on this beach, right? And we have a lone soldier, right? Sinon, right? Played by Elliot Page, right? Bradley, that you mentioned. And Sinon is there to ultimately kind of trick the Trojans, or, they're pretty much planted there, right? To make sure that happens, right? So, unfortunately, right, Sinon gets killed, right? But
fast.
Yes, right. It's literally like Sinon's on the screen for 20 seconds, right? It's like almost like they're there, they're dead, right? That's how much screen time we have for all the people, like all the discourse before about, oh, they're playing Achilles, and that was all bullshit. So, a bunch of people just jumped on the bandwagon for that, and then they created a character that literally dies within moments. So, but ultimately, right, so Sinon's deception helps them bring the Trojan horse into Troy, and that's what ultimately wins the war, right? But I like what they kind of do here, right? They don't really show what happens inside the walls yet, right?
Yeah.
And I really like that, right? Because it really sets up for a very impactful ending when he's, back in Ithaca at the end, right? So I thoroughly enjoyed how they kind of left this part out, right? So I won't really get into the siege yet, but I did want to talk about Sinon, right? Because this was a character, right, where, you know, they were added into this that wasn't originally in the Odyssey, right? Sinon shows up in later works dealing with the Trojan War, but it was not done by Homer, right? And I thought it was kind of intriguing to find that out because, for the most part, right, we see, you know, this 3-hour long epic, right? You have to condense some parts of it, but here we have Nolan adding in another character to kind of add more to the story, right? So I don't know if everyone knew that, right? I'm sure, Luke, I know you probably knew that. Brendan Bradley,
Yeah,
not sure if you
yeah,
knew
it's
that,
taken.
right?
Yeah, he's basically taken from the Aeneid by Virgil.
Yes, correct, right, absolutely. So this was a character that wasn't a part of it, right? So knowing that Sinon, right, was an added character, I wanted to get people's maybe feelings about that and how they impacted the overall story. And I'll start with whoever. I know, Brendan, technically you're kind of up next if you wanted to start off, but I'm open up to anyone that wants to get in and kind of talk a little bit about this character.
Well, I'll go last. So.
Oh, okay, Luca. I like that.
I'll go first because he's taking forever to unmute. So
That's fine. That's fine.
God, sometimes we're like, okay, Brendan, I see him start to lean forward. I'm like, dude, just unmute. Please, God, hurry up.
I'm sorry, Brendan. I'm not trying to make his life hard. I know he has a hard thing you got to do there. I'm sorry, Brendan.
Knowing the full arc of Sinon's story, the only thing I would have changed is that when Odysseus comes back with the little totem,
Mhm.
I wish that had been more impactful immediately. Like him sticking it in Robert Pattinson's mouth right before he kills him, fair. But the fact that Pattinson saw it and just like threw it away, that really bothered me. I wanted that dude to have a panic attack. I
Yeah.
wanted there to be like he carried it through. Odysseus literally carried 2 fucking things through the entirety of the Odyssey. One was a pin to his wife, and then one was this totem. And then Pattinson gets it, and he just like Luke Skywalker Force Awakens throws it over his back like it means nothing. And you're like, well, what the shit, man? Like that really bothered me. But yeah, we see Sinon in the first scene where they die so fast. We get the inside of the horse scene, part of that later. We get to see them when they talk about volunteering for the mission, the stain of the horse. And then in what I think is the coolest shot in the whole movie is when Odysseus is visited from those beyond the grave and they're coming up out of the ground. That's the coolest fucking shot in this movie.
Yes. Very cool.
But yeah, I wish it had been a little bit more impactful at the end with Robert Pattinson's character. I wish that had come full circle a little better. Because other than that, I genuinely do like their character. Yeah, when they first get attacked on the beach, it's like arrow, arrow. You're like, oh, maybe they'll walk it. Oh, that's a spear in the chest. Okay. They are very dead. But yeah, one thing I will also say, because that when we see them attack Sinon is the first time we see some of the Trojan warriors. I like how many of them are wearing helmets that cover most of their face.
Yes.
I'm always a big fan of like stormtroopers. I know in some of the Resident Evil movies, a lot of the bad guys are wearing motorcycle helmets for whatever reason. I like the idea of like the faceless bad guys. Like they're just not necessarily even bad guys, just faceless group characters. I kind of like losing a bit of that sense of individuality when it's a giant group. I don't know. There's just something I'm sure there's some lizard brain reason that I like it. But I do like that when you see a lot of the Trojan warriors in this, even later on when we see a lot of them, they're wearing very similar looking helmets. But yeah, Sinon's character, I thought the casting was perfectly fine. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen Elliot Page in anything I didn't particularly like them in. Granted, most of my experience with them is from the Umbrella Academy.
Yep.
Because I know what was the big thing they were in? Juno, that was it.
Yeah, Juno was probably the biggest. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then X-Men. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Don't forget also an Inception, right? So
yeah, fine. I was like, I only remember this one thing, and it was like the smallest of all the things they've been in. Yeah, I forgot about Inception. But yeah, I thought they were perfectly fine. I will say when you mentioned the Achilles thing, two thoughts about that. One is Christopher Nolan missed the chance to do something fucking hilarious. Would have been to have Sean Bean play Achilles. That would have been hilarious. But I really like that we don't see Achilles. I like
Yeah.
that there isn't a person as I didn't need it. And I'm like, I'm really
Yes.
glad that they didn't throw that in fan service, whatever. Nah, I don't. I mean, if it had been Brad Pitt, I would have laughed. But we didn't need it, and I'm glad they didn't do it. All
Awesome.
right, now
Thank you.
unmute faster.
Yeah, I haven't really read much of the Odyssey, so before the movie I did not know that Sinon was not a part of like the main story, but in doing some of the research afterwards, I learned that he was primarily from the Aeneid. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't read the Aeneid either, but I think most of the Trojan horse story and narrative comes from that. Like, I think it just gets a passing mention in the Odyssey proper. I could be wrong. I think that's what I was reading, but it makes sense to sort of blend the two, just because that is the story. You're making this story about the after effects of Odysseus, his PTSD, his trauma, his grief, and his regret about the Trojan War. You need to have this overarching symbol of where that grief comes from, and Sinon is, at least as used in this movie, is a very good focal point to that. But again, I could be wrong about where most of that comes from, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon. Luca, I know you picked last. I'm guessing you have
I was
something
like,
big.
save the best for last.
So yeah, I mean, what you want to keep in mind is that the reason why Troy wasn't called the Iliad, right, from 2004 is because at that time Wolfgang Peterson and David Benioff were drawing from different sources. So the Iliad was at the core of this movie, but again, he was drawing from different sources like, Aeschylus, Euripides, and Virgil and everyone else. The problem that I have here is that Nolan is doing the same thing, but he's calling it the Odyssey. Now, the Odyssey is, the poem itself is at the core of this movie, but Nolan is kind of doing a magpie thing where he's drawing from different sources from across the Greco-Roman world and piecing it together to create his version of the Odyssey, which is fine because because if you want to tell your own story, you obviously want to put your own spin on the narrative. But don't call it the Odyssey then. Call it something else. I mean, call it The Return or Odysseus or something like that. I mean, people will still recognize that it's the Odyssey just because it's a story that's been ingrained in our imagination for thousands and thousands of years. But I just feel like when you have to include an episode where we see Agamemnon being murdered by Clytemnestra because he sacrificed their daughter in order to get to Troy, I feel like at that point you're not really sticking to the story that you're supposed to be sticking to, because that whole mention about Agamemnon being killed, that's taken from the Oresteia, and I think it was either Menelaus or someone who or Agamemnon who mentioned that Orestes would eventually kill Clytemnestra and her lover and avenge him. That, again, that's taken from the Oresteia, and even what we see at the end of Troy where everybody's getting killed, that's a nod to Euripides, because Euripides at that time was famous for writing plays about the victims of war, right? Because he was writing at a time when Athens and Sparta were basically turning the entire Mediterranean into one huge slugfest. So everywhere from Sicily to Asia Minor, they were just slugging it out. So what we're seeing here is Nolan not so much telling a faithful adaptation to the Odyssey, but kind of just melding all these elements into something that he calls his Odyssey. It's not necessarily the Odyssey that we read in school, but it's an Odyssey that Nolan at least can say, this is my version of it. Right down to the end where they decide to just sail away. Another thing that I will mention too. So when we did our review of Frankenstein a few months ago, I mentioned how when Del Toro made this movie, he took some of the similar story beats that we're familiar with about Frankenstein, right? A guy basically goes and collects body parts, stitches them together, and creates life. Gets freaked out, runs away, and then the monster goes ape shit, and the two have a confrontation at the end, right?
Mhm.
We're familiar with the story beats, but Del Toro doesn't tell it the same way that Shelley told it. And it's the same thing that we're seeing here in the Odyssey, where Nolan is presenting us with the basic story beats of Homer's Odyssey, but he's rearranging it or omitting or adding elements to it to tell his own version of the story. So as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, I'm getting a weird sense of deja vu. And then when I went back and looked at our review of Frankenstein, I was like, that's the reason why. It's because Nolan is basically doing the same thing what Del Toro did to Shelley's story when he did Frankenstein. Now, is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily, but at the same time, I mean, there are people out there who will say, well, if you're going to do an adaptation of this work, you should at least try to be faithful to it. And my thing is that if Nolan wanted to tell the story that he wanted to tell, that's great, but don't call it the Odyssey. I mean, just do what they did in Troy and call it something else. That was my main gripe regarding that. I will also say too, the way that the Trojans are portrayed in this movie, I just found their armor quite simplistic. It looked like something you got from Party City or something like that. It looked like polyurethane armor that someone just decided to spray paint white. And they're like, well, there you go. The Greeks are wearing black armor and the Trojans are wearing white armor. I mean, what more do you want? And I'll also say too that when I looked at the city of Troy, I'm like, that looks like a garden wall. Am I being led to believe that little rinky-dink wall, a garden wall that you see in any neighborhood here in town, kept a Greek army at bay for 10 fucking years? Like, you didn't, like, had it never occurred to them that they just make a battering ram and knock down those walls? Like, what is this? It's like, I mean, I don't know. There are just like all these little elements that stood out to me that just made me scratch my head. And I'm like, well, Agamemnon brought 10 ships with him to fight a 10-year war. The Trojans have a garden wall that I could conceivably leap if I had a running start. And then you have a Trojan horse that looks like something that you would get in an antique store. Like, there are just a lot of elements to that just made me wonder, like, they just made me wonder, are the fantastical elements in just that we're supposed to suspend our belief and just accept the story that he's telling it, or is there something more to it? I mean, because he does say at the beginning of the movie, this is a time of apparent magic. Where the magic is, it's up, it's up to you to decide, because I think it's magical that someone can build, a beautiful wooden horse like that and stick a bunch of guys in there and no one will be none the wiser. But that's just me.
All right, fair. I will say that, at least for myself, right, to me, introducing the character added more to kind of the ending of it, right? So I thought that, while I don't disagree with you, Luca, that adding elements is always a little bit off-putting at times, I was totally fine with it, because to me, it just made us hate Antinous' character more, which ends up giving us really the physical manifestation of our villain, right? Obviously the gods play a huge factor into this in their non-corporeal form, so to say. But Antinous is ultimately the villain of it. So Sinon, to me, helped really flesh that out more, right? And while Sinon's character is super minor, right, and they die very quickly, I couldn't help but forget, like, why they have like this, little 5'2" person be a soldier. And I'm like, well, it looks like Nolan did have an idea behind that, right? It was a draft, right? It was something that it was not designed for them to pick the best of the best. It was designed for them to do the draft. And the fact that Antinous, right, had kind of this deal where it's like, oh, I'll help take care of your father if you go to the war for me, right? It makes him sleazy. And then the fact that he just didn't follow up on it makes him even that much more of a villain. So I like how those aspects to me were added in, but it only to me enhanced the story, right? It wasn't something where I felt like it was so out of place that it was going to happen, right? Like, you could have used anybody for that role, and maybe it doesn't appear in the Odyssey, but it makes sense to have that character be a part of it, because they do have to sell this idea that, oh, there's this horse on the beach. Now, I do agree with you, especially on this part, Luca, that the look of the horse has always been kind of a little bit off to me. I did like in Troy, I liked it better, because I do like the idea that they, we're using spare parts from a ship to create this, right? Also, I think they could have put some wheels on it. I feel like every iteration of the horse I've ever seen has wheels, so they could wheel it around instead of the way they did it. But you know, it ultimately felt like the introduction to the character, while it was different and not necessarily part of the original story, it was an added element. And I think that, you know, when I think about this film, right, you have 3 hours to tell an extremely long epic, right? You do not have a lot of time to play around. So I feel like when it comes to source material, as long as you're fairly faithful to the adaptation, that's good enough, right? I'm not someone that feels like it has to be like a carbon copy, nor do I feel like you can't add in a little bit to it. So when you have minor things like Sinon, who's in it for all of, you know, 3 or 4 minutes, to me, I don't really bat an eye at it. So that was just at least the way that I looked at it. But yeah, so we have Sinon, right? Sinon gets killed very, very abruptly in the film. And we have the fall of Troy, right? So after Troy falls, right, Odysseus is ready to return home, right? And I kind of like that part where, you know, Odysseus is just like, you know what, let's get off this fucking beach. I had to admit, like, that was one of those times where, like, the modern dialogue kind of got to me. I was like, huh, that's kind of weird. But in that same token, like, I do feel like if we're talking about this, if I've been stuck on a beach for 10 years and I just been, you know, living in tents and whatever the hell they're living in, I'm pretty sure I would have something similar to say. So Odysseus is ready to go on his trek home, right? Not realizing that this trek is going to take 10 years for him to do, right? So the first thing that they do is they go out and they have to pillage a nearby village, right? This is extremely minor in it. And Luca, I believe this is the Ciconians, right? That were depicted in the Odyssey, right? So there's a group of people that he had attacked right away. They weren't named in this, but that's what I interpreted them as being. Because that is exactly how that would have started, right? Was with the Ciconians, right? So after they, you know, attack the Ciconians, right? I guess it's a good time to bring up Zeus's law, because outside of, I think, Odysseus' name, Zeus's law is probably the second most common thing you hear in this. And Zeus's law is the idea that, you know, if you are a visitor to a place, right, you should be treated well, right? Like, you should be treated respectfully, because if you think about it, right, back in the day, there's not hotels around, right? You can't just go and come up with something, right? The whole idea is you have to be in a welcoming environment where you're going to be able to give that person support while they're on their travels, right? You can't just go up and call up a Holiday Inn at this stage. So that is the idea behind Zeus's law, something that was browbeat into our minds during the film.
Xenia.
Yes, yep. So, which, like I said, we will absolutely talk about that near the end, because I think that there is a huge climactic moment around that, but we'll get there. So after they get done attacking this village, right, they set out and they go. This is where the island hopping, right? I think, Bradley, you kind of mentioned this earlier. They don't spend a lot of time on the ships. They're just kind of island hopping throughout this, right? And I think that that's ultimately, you know, from a lack of a better option, how you have to depict it. So the first island they go to, this is where they meet the Cyclops Polyphemus, right? So Odysseus, right, brings his, you know, men into a cave, right? Looking to get some sheep, and there's some cheese that's there, what have you. And then all of a sudden, this Cyclops, right, comes in with all the sheep, right? And has this big old rock that it puts in front of the door, right? And I really love this sequence, right? Because the cave, other than the fire that they created, right? The cave goes pitch black, right? You see nothing other than the fire, right? You can't even see the Cyclops, right? This giant 60-foot thing, right? You can't even see that in the cave, right? And I really enjoyed the sequence, right? Because you see the Cyclops, it kind of just like eats a bunch of people, right? I think it eats like 2 people, and then it's just like, you know what? Now it's bedtime, right? and I really did love that part of it, right? Because, you know, I thought of it like this, right? And they do bring it up in the film. You know, what is what are these soldiers to a giant like that, right? A cyclops like that, right? They're literally just ants, right? It'd just be like they're nothing to him. So I really did like that. So it does take them a few attempts, but eventually they eventually devise a plan, right, to blind Polyphemus, right? They blind him with kind of like a hot poker, which kind of enrages him, and in his kind of, I guess, blinded state, right, it allows them to escape with the sheep, right? They kind of like tie some straw or whatever around their back to try to like, mimic the sheep, and they're able to escape, right? Now, this is where kind of an interesting thing happens, right? Because they escape from the cave, right? Odysseus decides like, hey, I'm gonna shoot this thing in the face, right? I'm gonna shoot at it. It kind of pisses it off before escaping, right? And that's kind of what happens where, we're able to escape the island with it. But I did want to talk a little bit about Polyphemus, right? In particular, like, this was a puppet, right, that was created for this. Did anyone else realize that was actually like not CGI or anything? It's like literally like a puppet that was created. I thought that was so cool to find out.
I mean, you did have Bill Irwin do the mocap for Polyphemus.
Yes. Like I said, super cool, right? The other thing I thought was super cool was, gosh, like it was actually kind of like horrifying. Yep. When the cave got closed, like it literally felt like I was in a horror film waiting for a jump scare of something to happen, which did happen. But yeah, how do you guys like the whole polygraph sequence there? I just call it polygraph.
I mean, the thing is that the interaction between Odysseus and Polyphemus that pretty much tells the story of who Odysseus is as a person, right?
Yes.
Because it shows just how clever he is, and just how both how reckless he, and clever he is as a person. Because as much as we want to say, oh, the Trojan horse, yeah, that's a brilliant strategic maneuver. I mean, he really did. He did have plenty of time to kind of work things out. Whereas when he's in the cave and his men are being eaten, he kind of has to think on his feet and figure out, what exactly am I going to do to get me, myself, my men out of here?
Yeah,
and I think Nolan missed a huge opportunity, because the whole point, of Odysseus being clever is he gets Polyphemus drunk, right? So that's another thing that I felt was a missed opportunity, is that we don't get to see Polyphemus talk. He's basically a big dumb brute.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
So
that was one thing that Brendan told me about, is I forgot about the conversation that they supposedly had about him telling him his name was it no one?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah.
I forgot about that, and once we talked about that a little bit, I was like, you know what? It would have been kind of cool to see that, but also the movie's 3 hours long, so I was like, okay, if you're gonna change something.
Yeah, but do you have to change? I'm sorry, but do you have to change that? I mean, listen,
that's not what I would have changed, but I get him thinking, okay, this movie's getting to be.
I mean, it's kind of like how how previously actors who played Batman have played him as the world's greatest martial artist, but they forget that he's also the world's greatest detective, right?
Yeah.
So my thing is that Nolan missed the opportunity, because he misses the opportunity to kind of lull Polyphemus into a false sense of security, get him drunk, give him his name is Nobody, and then when he blinds him, the other Cyclops that show up, they're like, hey, what's going on? And Polyphemus is saying, oh yeah, nobody's trying to hurt me, nobody's killing me. And the other Cyclops are like, oh, all right, well, just pray to your dad then, and we'll be off then. I felt that was like a huge missed opportunity. And also, I will say, like, when he's like screaming in the cave, I think Eurylacus says, oh, he's praying to Poseidon and he's his father. I'm like, how did you get that from from that? Because in the poem, when Odysseus like finally reveals his name and says, oh yeah, I'm Odysseus, I'm the one who blinded you, so touch grass, motherfucker. That's when Polyphemus is like, Father Poseidon, please avenge me, please make sure that Odysseus never gets home. Like, it's pretty clear, whereas here it's like, that's a huge extrapolation to make just from a giant one-eyed monster screaming Poseidon. But
yeah. I will say the first off, the horror aspect, literally halfway through that scene, I leaned over to Brendan when we were in the theater. I'm like, if Christopher Nolan doesn't make a fucking horror movie, I swear to God.
He
Like-
Brett, I don't know if you read this, but he said that's on the cards now. Like
Yes.
after making the Odyssey, he said that's something he's seriously entertaining now.
Dude, it was genuinely terrifying. That whole fucking scene. But there's one thing we talk about Odysseus being very intelligent. There is one part of this that we haven't talked about yet. That cave opens and closes more times than we've talked about so far, because their initial plan is when he opens it, we're all gonna run. I'm just like, fucking why? When you got here, the door was down. He peacefully went. He peacefully came. Would you not think, okay, he's going to put that down. Sheep are going to go out. He's going to leave. Then we just la-di-da-di-da. No, they run. Some of them make it out and some of them don't. That makes Odysseus, he got out. He jumps back into the cave with his men.
Yes.
And that's one issue that I have where I'm like, man, they're just mutiny every 5 seconds after this. I'm like, fuck you guys. Like, especially the whole course of the movie, everything he does to so desperately try to save his men. But this is a first good example of, I think they do a stupid thing by trying to sprint immediately, when I was like, the clues in front of you make me believe this dude's just gonna go out the cave on his own. Instead, you guys start charge. So I'm like, okay, not how I would have played it, but whatever. But then him jumping back in the cave, I think says a lot about his character. But at the same point in time, when he chooses to shoot the Cyclops at the end, that causes the death of 2 more of his men. Because when they're in the water, that Cyclops drowns 2 of them.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm like, oh God, him. When he uses his mind, he's great. When he goes off of emotion, other people die.
Yeah.
Like, consistently.
I want to mention one very brief thing with that, Bradley, because I agree with that. One thing that did stick out to me, though, right, is once again, it's him having his emotions get the better of him, right? Because originally, right, when he leaves, what to me provokes the arrow attack is he sees the helmet of a fallen comrade roll down the hill, right?
Yeah.
Which triggers his mind for, oh, this guy has killed it. Now I'm pissed off and I want to kind of, poke the bear, so to say. Not to say that justifies what he did, but I did like how, like, that was something I don't know if I quite captured that the first time I watched it. The second time I watched it, I was like, oh, okay. I kind of see more now of what really kind of, I guess, made him do something that I felt was originally very irrational. And then I was like, okay, not saying that was the best strategy, but it was something where I understood more about it.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. In that situation, I might have done the same thing. Because I'm like, fuck this dude. He ate some of my men. We've been trapped in here for days, and we're running down the hill to our ship. If I blind him, he's never gonna get us. And then when he starts very accurately following them, I'd be like, but I mean, yeah, I completely get the impulse of being like, yeah, I don't see that as an innocent, wounded creature. I see that as the monster that ate some of my men. And I think we're getting away. Fuck that guy. I'm going to put an arrow. I'd probably shoot him more than once. But then when he starts coming after them, you're like, okay, in hindsight, not good plan. But
that's when Odysseus knew he had fucked up.
It's 100%. Like, even when he gets up and starts screaming, I'm like, oh, they're fine. Oh no, he's very accurately following down the hill. Oh, they're fucked. Y'all better run. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but I 100% get the impulse. Like I said, I don't know if I maybe would have. I probably would have done the same thing. Fuck it, I'd have been like, "Fuck this guy." I'd have probably shot him in the nuts too. But yeah, I will say I assumed in seeing this, I assumed it was 100% CGI. Like, I was just, when we left, I was like, "That's just really good CGI." And then when Brendan told me about it, I looked it up. I never in a million years would have thought there was anything practical to that. I genuinely thought it was all CGI. I also really like how distorted his face is. Like, I like that usually when you see a Cyclops, it's just a regular human face with a big eye in the middle of the head. But this one it made it creepier. It made it a lot scarier, less human looking. And I really enjoyed that. I'm also glad I joked about his nuts. I'm glad we didn't see the lower half naked. Like, that's, not to be weird about it, but I'm like, that would have been one of those things. I'm like, that would have been unnecessary. I didn't need to see that.
Yeah, we needed the Ken doll version of this to help us out. So
100%, 100%. But yeah, he was fucking terrifying. I thought
Yeah.
that whole island was just done so well. And this is one of the first times in the movie where I started actively thinking the sound editing, sound choices in this are like Oscar worthy. They are absolutely incredible. I did see a joke about this is the loudest movie I've ever seen. I'm like, that's fair. But there are so many sound choices in this where I'm just like, I couldn't have done it better.
Yeah.
Just so fucking spot on.
Right. Brendan, did you have anything to add about our favorite Cyclops?
Yeah, obviously the thing I thought about was when I heard that Christopher Nolan was going to be doing the Odyssey was, well, this is a guy who likes to use CGI as little as possible.
Mhm.
So how is he going to do these things? I really like the use of the puppet and the puppetry and the forced perspective and everything else in there. It's old school filmmaking, and I love it. Let's see. The Sorry, I'm hearing feedback. The jump that Luca referenced with the Poseidon thing, you hear him kind of mumbling at one point in there, and I think you're supposed to hear Poseidon. I think the sound mixing is really good. It's just it was a little hard to interpret what Polyphemus was saying in that moment, and then they make the leap to, oh, it's Poseidon's son. I think the inherent issue with that is, number one, they decided to only have the one Cyclops as opposed to having the whole island of Cyclopses. So
Mhm.
you had to kind of skip past the whole nobody thing and having all of these things there because, Nolan wants to make this as grounded and as non-CGI as possible. So you're not going to have a whole island worth of these puppets to deal with. And that leads itself to the other issues with sort of the logic and the plot, like Bradley said, with why don't they just all mosey on out with when Polyphemus opens the rock the next day, and instead of having this grand like run out charge plan and having to go back and forth with this thing forever, it feels like it's a little bit just to keep them there and go through the motions and build up the plot and lose some of the soldiers. Let's see. I think this is the first instance where we get kind of what Nolan's overall thesis of this movie ends up being, because we keep hearing these mentions of the people from the sea people, these
Mhm.
people who are, I guess, historically, based on the historical accounts, these are people who would, go around the Mediterranean and raid villages and stuff like that.
Yes.
In this story, Nolan reinterprets them to be of a different nature, and this is the first instance of him playing into what is that overall thesis that I'm sure we'll come to by the end of this thing.
Yes.
But
Mhm.
so I think that's what a lot of this sequence is starting to serve. It also does play to a bit of Odysseus's hubris in that way when he does take that second shot that everybody was discussing as they're trying to get out of the island, and it just further enrages. But yeah, absolutely. I echo 100%. I need Christopher Nolan to find that concept he keeps talking about that he's really excited about so he can make that horror film. I need to see it. I need it. I need it in my bones. I feel it in my bones. I need it.
No, yeah, I agree. The horror sequence was really creepy, right? And there is stuff that, to Lucas' point, right? Like the whole nobody thing is both really memorable in it. I also wonder how much it would come across in this, because it does kind of, if you think about it, it's like, why would he be screaming and it'd be like, oh, nobody's hurting me? And like, I'd be like, what the hell do you mean, right? Like, I don't know if that's one of those things where I wonder if through the course of time, if that rings the same way as it would have back then, right? Like it's something where we've, kind of, as we've gone through, obviously, millennia after that, right? Like it is one of those situations where I don't know how well that translates to the big screen. because it just, I don't know, feels a little bit goofy. But I also feel like it is very iconic for it. So you're kind of in a rock and a hard place to play, because yeah, he's not going to want to have a whole bunch of puppets that are going to be created just for this one sequence. So I don't know. I do think that was probably one of the weaker things. I don't like the fact that they make him really just stupid, right? That was, well, let me not say that. Not stupid per se, nonverbal, right? Because Brendan, you're right. He does say Poseidon, right? So we do kind of get that. There is kind of a really weird logic leap that he is a son of Poseidon. But there is at least something for that. But yeah, I do feel like it was both. The horror parts were really cool, but I think they could have played the Cyclops a little bit differently. So the crew, like I said, escapes for Polyphemus, right? And then they go to the next island that's in their journey, right? And this is to
baby Jesus.
This is to the Lestrygonians. So these are at least in the story, right? In the Odyssey, it is they're a group of like really big cannibals, right, Luca? And I'm guessing that Nolan was like, hey, let's not make them cannibals because we already had cannibal Cyclops, so we're just gonna kind of just make them giants, right? So you kind of see them approach the beach, and they're like walking through the forest, and you see like this person in armor, right? And then when you get up and it looks, it's like, oh god, that's really creepy looking. It's like a 4-year-old that's the size of like a normal like human being, like a 6-foot tall human being, and it's just like, oh, like that, like I know what he's going for, but like it doesn't pass the uncanny valley with me. And then like, you know, the little, I'm sorry, I should call it little, the giant kid runs away and then summons like all these other giants that start to chase them back to the ship. And oh boy, was this a massacre, right? Because we see for Odysseus, there's 3 ships, right? That he lands on the island with. And all but his ship gets destroyed, right? So you can pretty much say, hey, 2/3 of his crew were probably killed on that island. And those giants, man, like they walk into the water and they're just beating the shit out of that ship. Like they just tear it up. And I'm like, oh, damn, like that would have been a foe too hard for anyone to really overcome. And yeah, that was pretty wild, right? So we have only one ship left, right? So they go to another island. This time, right, they land on the island that has the witch Circe on it. So I like how you're like kind of like going up the island, right? So you're kind of seeing like these exotic animals there, and you have to be like, how do these animals get here? This is kind of weird. And I like how you eventually get up there, right? They meet Circe, and Circe, you know, gives them a nice meal, and they pig out on it, and there is some pun intended with that, right? So they really pig out on it, and oh my god, like let me tell you, it is pure nightmare fuel for me when those soldiers are sitting there eating that stuff, and they just slowly start to form into actual pigs, right? Like you see her, like, you know, kind of like running her hands through their like around their ears, and then you see like they become like little pig ears. There's like one soldier where she just like flat on just like sticks her whole hand down his throat, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like it's all done very much like in camera, right? Like it's all practical, right? I there might be some like CG that they might use for it, but my gosh, like it was all very much there. So you know, all of his you know, crewmen, right, or at least the ones that, you know, go to the island, they're all now you know, turned into pigs, right? So Odysseus, right, he has stood back, right, because his men have some concerns over him right now.
They've like lightly mutinied at this point.
Yes, very. Which he even brings up, right? He even says, "Is this a mutiny?" So I think he understands what's going on. So, but Odysseus, right, he's, you know, kind of doing some hunting on his own, and he ends up shooting, you know, a deer or something like that. And we find out that the deer is actually a human, right? So Odysseus goes up now to meet Circe, right? And you see, he's there. You got all the little pigs out in the front. And I like how Cersei's like, yeah, you can come in and you can just, grab one of the pigs and we'll carve that up. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh shit, is he gonna slaughter one of his own men, right? And it kind of gets played up, but eventually Odysseus, right? He just kind of figures out what's going on, and he finds, the one of his one of the soldiers' rings, right, is on the table, right? So he kind of deduces what's going on. And even more awesome, right, was he figures out that, hey, this like crow that's next to him is actually like Cersei's sister, right? Has this connection. So I like how it really does show like Odysseus being able to really figure this stuff out on a fly, sometimes with very minimal information, but super cool. But eventually what happens is he figures out like, hey, cool, what it is. He convinces Cersei to turn his men back into real people, and they go to the next leg of their journey, which is they go to Hades, right?
Yeah.
But I did want to take a second, right, to kind of get you guys, feedback on anything, whether you want to talk about the Giants or whether you want to talk about Cersei. So, Brendan, I know I'll start with you, right, because, and I'll give you some time to unmute, because I know you said, like me, right, that you thought that Cersei, right, did a very good job. Samantha Morton did a great job with the acting for that character with very little screen time. So I'll open it up with you first, Brendan. Anything you want to share about either the Lestrygonians or Cersei?
The only thing I really have to say about the Lestrygonian sequence is I really like the way they kind of utilized. There's a scene where they're trying to run away from the Lestrygonians, and you see the trees kind of coming in and encircling everybody, and it becomes this sort of magical cage almost. I really liked that aspect. That's another little like horror-esque sequence, I think, in the middle of everything. So I really liked that. Other than that, there's not really much to go on with the Lestrygonians. It's a very like blink and you miss it sort of thing. But yeah, the whole sequence on Cersei's Island is just phenomenal. Samantha Morton just eats every little bit of this role that they gave her. I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up with a supporting actress nod from this thing, honestly. That's just me personally. But I think the whole sequence was mostly practical. I think they used a lot of animatronics and makeup and everything else. Knowing Nolan, that makes a total sense. It, like you said, it's very fun to kind of see a little bit of Odysseus's cleverness and his ability to like puzzle things out, sitting there going toe to toe with Cersei in that moment. I think this is another step in that what I talked about before with Polyphemus, where you're starting to get this sort of movement towards the overall thesis of the movie because Cersei really talks about like how people come and they take and they pillage and they do all of these things on her island, and this is her getting the retribution for those moments and taking back her power in a sense to take care of to fight against these invaders that are coming to her island and taking advantage of her. And so I don't know. I think it's a very well done sequence. The pig effects are another, like, it's body horror, and it's very effective. Body horror is not my thing. I hate body horror.
He is an absolute wuss when it comes to body horror. If he sees one finger go the wrong way, he's like, nope, I'm out, turn it off.
Oh man, I watched The Fly and ooh baby.
I can't do it. Like, even watching, what was it?
The Substance was the one that you were like,
even watching The Substance, which I know is very light on the body horror, that stuff really just it's not my type of horror. So it bothers me. This one was really good. Like, it freaked me out just enough, but it didn't push me too far. It's just, It's fantastic. It's brilliant filmmaking. I really enjoyed the hell out of this moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Brendan. Bradley, we will go over to you.
The Lestrygonians, the only thing I didn't know that was a thing. Like in the story of Odysseus, I knew
Mhm.
about Calypso, Circe, the Cyclops. I did not know this was a part of the story.
Yes.
I like seeing how fucking unkillable these things are. Like the fact
Yeah.
that he gets one. They are literally ripping their ships apart with their bare hands, and you're just like, yeah, there was no chance against these guys. They were just absolutely done. And yeah, the stuff with Samantha Morton, I will say there's a really nice thing where an added effect to how gross everything was the food itself. You know, if they were
Yes.
eating like beef stew and bread, it wouldn't have worked as much. But what they're eating, I can't tell what it is. There's some weird seafoody noodle looking things, and they look at the food, and I'm like, I can only identify half of what I'm looking at right
Yeah,
now.
I actually thought it was like a pig intestine.
I mean, it's literally mystery meat.
Yeah, it is such a good use because it really is like what they're eating looks gross, it sounds gross, and then yeah, the way that she is just getting in there and working them and to see the body parts start to morph and turn into other body parts. This is, I will say, another thing where Odysseus could have been like, fuck those guys, they mutinied against me, to each their own. Granted, he wouldn't have gotten very far trying to captain the ship by himself, but this is one time where Odysseus's knowledge, to me, annoyed me a little bit. Him figuring out that his men were pigs is fine. Him seeing her relation to the bird, I was a little bit like, where did this come from? Like, I feel like maybe he Spidey sensed a little too hard. And I'm like, I feel like maybe there was something I was supposed to see. Like, did you guys, was there something that he saw where he was like, okay, specifically this bird, not one of the other 9 animals on the path, this bird is the only thing I can threaten her with?
I thought it was a bluff. That's what I was thinking.
Well, I did see she does like go out of her way to feed the bird particularly, right? It doesn't feed it directly from what they're getting. I don't know if that's enough to justify it, but that was one thing that stuck out to me was there was a very minor interaction with the bird. I think, like you said, maybe we spider sensed a little bit too much from that, but there at least was something there.
Because she's feeding the pigs when he walks up. Yeah,
that is true.
Yeah,
Yep,
maybe the only thing I was thinking is this is the one animal she keeps in her house. But I don't know. I do feel like maybe he spider sensed a little too hard.
Yes.
I was like, okay, like I said, figuring out the men, I get it. Seeing the rings, perfect. I maybe think there was just one little bit of something missing here that I would have liked to see, because I feel like he figured that out a little too fast.
Yeah.
But no, beyond that, I adore her. I do think these scenes are great. I know this is pretty different from the way it's in the story, the way it was written. I think I read that they had a kid together and he stayed here for like a year.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was gonna say, whenever we get to it, I've got a pretty good spiel about the time frame in movies, because I understand time-wise why Nolan does what he does. And I feel like this is the first part where I'm like, no, if he had slowed it down here, people would have had issues with it. But we'll get to that later. Because yeah, I don't have anything else to add to the Cersei stuff too much. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I also find it interesting because like he deduces a lot, right? And I like how like when the soldiers are still human, right? They go to put their armor outside, and one of the soldiers notices all the other armor that's just out in the back, and that doesn't give anyone pause. They're just like, no, you know what? I'm too hungry. I ain't gonna worry about this. So it's funny how his soldiers are pretty much dumbfounded to anything, and he's able to come up with as much as he does. So, Luca, we'll pass it over to you here.
I'm just wondering why the Lestrygonians were wearing armor. That's my thing.
Made them look cool.
I mean, they look like giant insects. That's my thing. But I was thinking about this because the way that Odysseus' crew is being attacked, at every island they're going to, it kind of makes you wonder if it isn't just the humans who are aware of the threat of the sea people. If maybe the Lestrygonians, the Cyclops, Circe, they're all behaving in this sort of way as a sort of anticipation for what's about to come, right? So maybe I don't know. So maybe the Cyclops has his own remedy on how to deal with the sea people by eating them. The Lestrygonians, they're kind of all armored up because they're anticipating, that the sea people are going to be coming in waves, and so they better be ready to kind of take them down. And Cersei's figured out, well, if I can turn them into animals, then they're a lot more manageable. Then they're not running around rampaging all over the place, really. But I will say this too, because as we're like going deeper and deeper into this, like the more I think about it, what Nolan's doing in the Odyssey is less of an epic and more of a horror film, really. Kind of similar to what you would see in The Northman by Eggers, or or Nosferatu. Like he's going for that dark gothic element, and it's something that we've seen, in his previous movies like Memento, for instance, right, or even Inception, which kind of has a bit of a sci-fi gothic vibe to it. But here, this is it's very visceral. It's very in your face, especially when she's like taking the men's faces and pulling them in all sorts of directions to turn them into pigs' heads and into these beasts. It's like it's like there is something quite unsettling going on here, and I would even add that what Nolan's doing here is kind of giving us the sense that that when you're outside of home, right? When you're outside of the familiarity of home, everything is very foreign. Everything is very dangerous. I mean, even when he was at Troy, it was very dangerous because he was laying siege to a city for 10 years, and the enemy army was very much determined to make sure they didn't get in. So it's sort of that narrative theme of home is where you're meant to be, because that's where you're safe. That's where you're familiar. But at the same time, I mean, what we see in the Odyssey is even home doesn't feel safe. Even home doesn't feel familiar. So, so Odysseus is basically going through all these trials, and by the time he gets back, it's like, oh shit, I spent 10 years wandering the seas, coming across, a lady who's turning my men into pigs, and a six-headed monster in a crazy ass whirlpool, and now I got to deal with all these guys here. Like, I cannot not catch a break.
Yeah, no, for sure. And actually, Bradley, you mentioned something really cool, right? And I want to ask Luca this too, because I want to get your perspective on this, Luca, in particular, because I know you mentioned earlier about changing things within the Odyssey. Do you feel like for him, right? Do you feel like for Nolan, not including the relationship that Cersei and Odysseus has for a year, do you feel like that was a worthy omission not to have, because it would have maybe changed the story in a way that the audience wouldn't appreciate Odysseus the same way?
It's not Nolan's style to do something like that. That's a simple answer. Nolan doesn't.
No, it's not a simple answer. I'm asking you specifically if him omitting that information would have made it a better story.
No,
because you mentioned how earlier.
So the way I see it, it really wouldn't have made much of a difference, because Nolan wouldn't do a story like that anyway. So for him to have Odysseus stay on that island and have a relationship, it wouldn't have made the movie any better, because it would have detracted from what he was trying to tell overall, really. So really, the way he told that story about his interaction with Cersei and Odysseus is perfect, because he's trying to convey this idea that where he's going to is unknown, right? And by having Cersei and Odysseus kind of have that relationship, it creates this level of familiarity where all of a sudden the mystery is just taken out of it. And Nolan is trying to keep everybody on edge. Because obviously he's trying to keep Odysseus on edge, because he doesn't know what's over the next horizon, right? So by introducing a romantic element to it, one, that will be very much out of place. You might as well just ask Nolan to direct the next Friends, reunion movie, right? And two, all of a sudden it would lose any air of mystery that that we've been building up ever since he left Troy, trying to get home to Ithaca, right? So also you want to keep in mind too, like when he's on that island and he discovers that deer is actually a man, it kind of lends into this thing that nothing's right here. Yes, like everything about this, everything in this island doesn't seem right. There's nothing familiar about it. So again, if he and Cersei decide to get it on, all of a sudden that would just ruin everything that he had built up to that point. So it's better to kind of just keep everybody on edge, kind of keep that mystery, kind of keep that notion that you don't really know where Cersei is, and the reason why Cersei cooperates is because she's being coerced. Really, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean that's the reason why she even bothers to help, because if she's like, well, if I don't help, then they're going to do something to my sister and possibly me. So I better play nice. And the sooner I play nice, the sooner they can get off my island, the sooner I can get back doing whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah. Yep. Great point. And I also like the fact that you mentioned, like, you can't really trust anything on the island, right? There's that nice little quip as they're leaving the island, like, don't take any of the meat, right? Because, well, you don't know what you're getting, right? It might be a little bit more.
Well, Lee, I have a question I'm going to ask you at the very end. So I want you to think long and hard, as I bring this up later on, because it ties into it pretty much ties a bow into into the review that we began with, the return that kind of peaked with Troy, and that we're bringing to an end here. So
got it. All right, so we are going off of Cersei's island, right? So we're going on the more of this adventure, right? And I'm not gonna lie, like, these next parts I think are to go pretty quick. I will, if anyone wants to jump in at editing sequence, please just interrupt me. Just for the sake of brevity, I'm going to try to get through these last sequences because I consider them to be more minor in the grand scale of everything, at least as far as how much of it is with the story. So Cersei has told Odysseus, right, that he needs to go to Hades, right, in order to talk to, I don't know, some dude that's there. I didn't even write down the name because it just pops up once. Begins with the T. Luca, do you know the dude's name? Triceratops or something?
Tiresias.
Thank you, Tiresias. Pretty close.
Oh no, he's played by such a good actor.
I know, right? And it's not done in any bad way. It's just that, unfortunately, it's just kind of like a, hey, I'm here to fulfill my role because I'm in the story.
You want to talk about characters you see for all of 8 seconds? He is and his like face is half covered in mud.
Yes, it's all super cool, right? So the group they go to Hades, right? And they you see kind of all these past soldiers, right, coming out of the ground, right? Which super cool effect, right? And I guess it took them a long time to get it done properly because, like, it was hard because he literally does have people popping out of the ground, right? So took a long time to get it done, but eventually they got it done, and it looks great, right? Because you see him and he meets some of his fallen comrades, right? So he first talks with Sinon, right? Who pretty much like berates him for, like, oh, you got me killed. And, this is like, well, I was right there with you. And he's like, oh, is that supposed to give me a whole lot of comfort? And I'm like, oh shit. Like, damn, Sinon really fucking going in on him. So, but this is where, Sinon gives the little totem or the little object, right, that he's been carrying around with him, which once again connects back with Attenuous, right? So Attenuous, kind of, I guess, bribed Sinon to take his place in the war, right? So this is something that Sinon is held on to all this time. And he also speaks with Agamemnon, right? Agamemnon, this is where they get the flashback. And thank you, Luca, for actually bringing this up because this was really interesting, right? So Agamemnon killed by Helen of Troy's sister, Chlamydia, something like that, right? I'm not a Greek person, so I'm sorry. I'm sure it's something like that. So, but we find out about Agamemnon, right, and pretty much his death as soon as he returns home. Not to give Odysseus any fear, right, that somebody else died when he got back, and now he has to worry about that when he comes home. So he, meets these two, right, and then they're like, okay, well, we need to get out of here now because the rest of these guys are really angry with me because we didn't bury them properly. So it's time to get the hell out of hell, literally. So they go back to the ship, right? Then they go through the sequence with sirens, right? So they put a whole bunch of earwax into their ears, right? And they go by the sirens. The only one that doesn't do that is Odysseus, right? Who pretty much gets strung up to the mast, and you see him kind of just totally freaking out as he listens to the song, right? One of the soldiers, takes out the earwax and then ends up jumping off the ship, so he's dead. So they
one
make
Asian
it.
guy in the crew.
Yes, yeah, the one. Yep.
Like, I was like that in a not weird way. That guy caught my attention every time, and then when
I
he
know,
pulled the
right?
wax out, I'm like, come on, really?
Yep. Yep. So he doesn't make it, right? And then they go to this sequence, right, where there's the whirlpool, right? That's Charybdis, and Scylla, which is I think like a six-headed monster. So they have a choice, right? They could either, try to, surpass the whirlpool, right? Which Odysseus was told that if you do that, everyone's gonna die, or you would go towards Scylla, right? And then only 6 people will die. So Odysseus, and I kind of like this, and I kind of interpret it like this, that he pretty much decided that, you know what? Because, to Bradley's point, my team wants to constantly mutiny on me. If I tell them a stupid direction, they're going to decide that, hey, this is really dumb. We're going to go a different way. And because of it, only 6 people could die, not everybody. So, because no one has any faith in Odysseus now, so he might as well just, give some shitty advice. So they go one way. So they make it past Scylla, right? And then they have an island that's out in the distance, right? And this island is this for the sun god Apollo, right? And he has some cattle that's on the island. And pretty much if the soldiers are to eat the cattle, they would die. And Odysseus, he just flat out tells them, like, hey, look, guys, I'm not going to lie to you. If you eat those cattle, I was told you're all going to die, right? Well, they don't eat the cattle initially, right? And they survive on the island for, I think, about a year before they decide that, you know what? I'd rather starve than drown, right? So they decide, hey, we're going to go ahead and eat the cattle. And as soon as they eat the cattle, right, the winds allow them to escape the island, which I could just play the it's a trap from Star Wars. That these guys, they're totally screwed, right? It's not going to happen. So, of course, they end up, on the ship, right? The storm is horrendous, right? Obviously, the gods very much not in their favor. And this is where the rest of Odysseus' crew dies. And this is where Odysseus, as the lone survivor, he ends up going to Calypso's island, right? Which is where all this flashback has kind of happened, right? So this is where he has, kind of gotten us, I guess, back to the current. And he's working with Calypso in order to go back to Ithaca, right? So now, and I apologize for the audience that's listening, right? Because I know I kind of fast forwarded through that, but there's honestly so much that I didn't feel like it was purposeful to kind of stop at each instance. But I just wanted to, I guess, if anyone want to add anything about his journey back to Ithaca, right? Because once he's at Calypso's island and he leaves it, he makes it back to Ithaca. So I just wanted to see for people how they feel about the journey so far, right? So, some of the things we've already kind of talked about. I do think that there was some, interesting kind of omissions from some stuff, right? So one, there is these Phaeacians, right, that are supposed to be the part of the story, but aren't for this. And I think that Nolan kind of does a good job of trying to maybe merge some things together because, there is a sequence that they're supposed to go to the Lotus Eaters, but he kind of combines that with Calypso. There is also the bag of wind that he doesn't even get from Aeolus. But I want an opportunity for people to talk about kind of the journey so far, if there's anything you wanted to add or talk about with that before we get to, I think, the most grounded part of this, which is when he finally makes it back home.
So,
we'll start. Anybody, sorry, everyone wanted something to say, so I'm good with anybody that wants to start.
I'll go first.
Okay,
I agree with what you said. It does plot point wise. I mean, when they're on the island with the cows, there's not really a whole lot to say there. I like the imagery of seeing the wind hitting that like little flag they've got.
Yes.
I like the image of that turn around. You're like, okay, cool. That was a show, don't tell type thing. I was cool with that. The fact that they took the cow so far away from him and dug out their little pit to cook it in. It's one of those things. It makes me think of like a kid. Like they know what they're doing is wrong. So instead of them just doing it, they're going to kind of like try to hide it a little bit. They didn't hide it worth a shit. But the one thing I will say is I mentioned earlier that I was really hoping Agamemnon was never going to speak. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want him to speak. One thing is I'm so shocked that he went back home and he's like, my wife, my loving wife, whose child I murdered, wasn't happy to see me. No, like, come on, man. But I really, really liked that when he spoke to Odysseus, there was a kindness to what he said and how he said it. Like he wasn't just a, oh, woe is me, my tale is so sad. He was also trying to warn him and guide him. And I really liked the idea because the version that I tend to think of is the Brian Cox version from Troy. He didn't give a fuck about anyone. I mean, he even like he yelled a bit, and you can tell there was a certain extent to which he cared about his brother. But after that, he didn't give a fuck. I really liked having an Agamemnon that you can tell there was a bit of, if not love, at least care towards those under him. And I liked that when he spoke, the writing was nice to him as a character. The images of the men coming out of the ground where it's all black and their hands are coming through, it's fucking awesome. That's like my favorite shot in the movie. But yeah, other than that, we really are just like plot point to plot point. That was the only thing I particularly enjoyed about this section was when Agamemnon does speak, I was like, you know what? I dig it. I like what he's saying. That's really all I had to add.
Thanks, Brendan. Luke, or Brent?
Yep.
Yeah, Brendan. I see you come off mute. So.
Oh yeah, you're good. I think it's kind of appropriate that we sped run this whole section because I think for me this is where the movie kind of bogs down pacing wise. I think the pacing gets a little off in the second act, and it just I don't know. I can't tell exactly where it is. I think if it's on the ships necessarily, or if it's the stuff with Calypso. I think it might be a combination of the two. But this is where the pacing really falls down a little bit in the movie for me, and I think they could have tightened it up a little bit. The stuff with the underworld for me was really cool in terms of the way that they shot it, because they shot it in Iceland, and there's these volcanic sand beaches that are actually black, and that's the sand that they used to shoot them rising out of. And yeah. And then the way that they got the lighting effects is that they shot it, I believe, in I can't remember if it was the summer or the winter. I think it was the summer. But that Iceland is so far north in the sea that it's like Alaska in the summer, where you get perma day even at midnight, where you still have a little bit of sunlight going on. So they shot that over the course of a series of days and weeks at midnight, to get that ethereal perma daylight sort of feel for, and it's just such cool innovation in filmmaking.
I already liked this scene so much, even without knowing that now I'm like, fuck, dude, that is fucking cool.
As far as I think it works fine to combine Calypso and the Lotus Eaters together. Like, again, I don't know much about the Lotus Eaters from the Odyssey. Reading it proper, I think everything is a little too bogged down here. I think it's just a way to sort of justify Odysseus being stuck for 7 years with Calypso. Because I think one of the key points of this movie is, and I think we talked about it a little bit and touched on it with the Cersei thing about how he didn't spend a year with her. This movie's very much about the homecoming and sort of the loyalty and desire to get back to Penelope in that way. So you're kind of giving a justification for why Odysseus would spend 7 years with this woman on this island, outside of the fact that
You've
it's
seen
Charlize
her?
Theron. Outside of the fact that it's Charlize Theron, but
For the record, he said that because I was laughing maniacally in the background because he knew exactly what I was going to say.
I mean, honestly, like I wouldn't mind being stuck on an island for 7 years for Charlize Theron.
Dude,
So, honestly,
seriously, he's stuck between her and Anne Hathaway. Oh God, what a rock and roll place.
or Scylla and Charybdis.
Odysseus having a hard knock life. So,
But
Luca. I'm sorry, Brendan. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Oh no, you're good. That was basically all I had.
Okay.
Those were the only notes for this section.
Okay, thank you. And Luca, I'll let you wrap up here with the last part, I guess, of the more fantastical part of the journey before we get into the just kind of the more human elements of it.
Lee, I just think it's kind of odd that that for the return for Troy, you were kind of waffling between having an issue with with fantastical elements being included or excluded. The question I want to ask you here is, did you find that it was fantastical enough, or it was fantastically insufficient?
That's a good question. I would have,
because we've been going back and forth about this for 2 reviews now.
I know, right? And honestly, Luca, I think I would have liked to see the gods, but then I also get worried that, like, because this is a 3-hour long film, I think it just would have been too much, right? I think you throw too many characters in there, because then it's like, oh, I got to talk about, we have to see a Poseidon, we have to see an Apollo, we have to see, I mean, we do see Athena, but we have to throw in too much. I think that the gods had obviously a very minor role in this, right? We see how they impact the elements, but we don't see like a physical embodiment of them. I think that what he did was good enough, because I feel like there's just too much of a conflict with all these other gods. It just would have made it too noisy. Now, if he had more time, like if this was like a 2-part something, right? Or if this was like a mini series that, some adaptations of the Odyssey is done, I think you include them. And I think that really adds an interesting flavor to it. But once I see this as it is, and I still feel like there were aspects of it he should have included with it, you can't add the gods. It's just too much. Like, as much as I would have liked to see it, I just don't think for the story it would have worked out.
I mean, it is interesting that he has no problem including monsters, but the gods, they're mere suggestions. Because I mean, when you look at Athena, I mean, it's not really Athena; it's just the manifestations of his consciousness and his guilt.
Correct.
Really.
Yes. Which we'll definitely talk about Athena, right? So, but yeah, no, I think that goes to more the focus being on Odysseus and his journey. So having the monsters helps us understand what that is, because that's the trials that he goes through, where with the gods, right, they're all kind of like fighting amongst themselves too, right? It's like kind of like a side story that's kind of happening with this. So I feel like he kind of was like, hey, I want this to be more about Odysseus, and I want to take out kind of these other elements that are part of it, because it might have made it too disjointed. So I think if it was like a longer film, right, I think you could have include them. And I do believe that I want to see it like hours more footage than what's in the film, right? Like, they absolutely had to cut this down quite a bit. So it does make me wonder how much of it was removed for the sake of the film with it. But yeah, that's, as much as I wanted to see the gods, after seeing it, I just don't see how it works. Do you think he could have made it work, Luca? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, my thing is, and I've told you this time and time again, ad nauseum, is that Nolan has a propensity for telling realistic stories, right?
Yes.
So again, I feel like he could have conceivably have told the story of the Odyssey, but I feel like in this case, if you were going to have the monsters, then you need to have the gods, because they're so intertwined with each other. I mean, we only need to look to Polyphemus, who we talked about, a few minutes ago, about him being the son of Poseidon, right? And the whole reason why Odysseus can't get back to Ithaca, because it's a straight beeline to Ithaca from Troy, all right? Let's make no bones about it. But because he pissed off the god of the sea, that's why he ends up wandering for 10 years. and never being able to get back home.
Mhm.
I feel like Nolan is trying to do this, having his cake and eating it too kind of moment, where he's going to have the monsters, because that's the element that we're familiar with, but he's going to take out the gods because they're a bit of an inconvenience in how he's trying to tell the story, because he's trying to keep it moving, as it were. But my issue is that if you're going to have the monsters, then you should at least have the gods in there, right?
Mhm.
But all we get is just a suggestion of a god in Athena.
Yeah.
And even
Mhm.
then, she doesn't really play that much of a role. She's more of like, they're just prodding him and just saying, hey, well, remember what you did at Troy? Remember like all the bad stuff you did? Do you really think you're a good guy?
Mhm.
And it's like, well, you could be a bit more helpful, because I mean, the reason why Odysseus doesn't get turned into a pig is because Hermes gives him moly to
Correct.
basically render him immune, or the
Mhm.
fact that or the fact that Zeus directly sends Hermes to Ogygia and tells
Mhm.
Calypso, hey, you gotta let this guy go. He's got a family to get back to. You can't keep him, have him as your fuck toy for 7 years. So it's one of those things where it's like, if he's going to include one element of the fantastic, he should include the other element in there. Or if he's going to stay true to form and just be a bit more realistic in his approach, he should approach it the way that they did The Return, or the way that they did Troy. But it's kind of one of those things where, as I'm watching, I'm wondering where it's like he's trying to accommodate way too many things into this movie, and something's got to give, right? And unfortunately, his propensity for telling a realistic story kind of gets sidelined, because because at one point we're focusing on the Cyclops, and then we're focusing on Scylla and Charybdis, but then that gets sidelined for realistic storytelling, and we kind of forget that Athena plays a huge role in him getting home to Ithaca, and even helping him out and spying out the land, and even taking out some of the suitors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no,
so you have so it's like, well, he wants to do both, but in the end, he's not really giving us what we're expecting.
No, absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. Bradley and Brendan, did you want anything else to add? I know maybe, the whole God angle might not be something that either of you guys are as familiar with, but do you have any thoughts about like the inclusion or exclusion of the gods that kind of played a role in this? Because to Luca's point, right, they absolutely do have a critical role in this. It's just in Nolan's adaptation, they have they take a backseat to everything else. So do either one of you guys have any I guess insider thoughts about that, if you want to add in anything?
I will say I was fine with it. At least my remembrance of the Iliad versus the Odyssey is that the gods played a very important part in the Iliad, in the sense that they were literally partaking in the battle. Like, they were on the battlegrounds, and there were some times where some gods fought one on one side, one on another. And I thought one of the gods got injured, and that was when Zeus was like, okay, no more gods. We can't be involved in this. At least that's what I remember.
Yeah, in the Iliad, the river god actually goes up to Zeus and says, "Hey, you got to put your foot down, because the Greeks and Trojans are killing each other so much they're actually clogging up my river, and it's causing a bit of an issue. So can you tell them to back off, because I don't want to live in a literal shithole."
Yeah, so even just knowing that, I think it was, I don't know. I honestly think that audiences struggle with seeing gods in movies, because we have the idea, especially in our culture, of the God, the omnipotent, everything is all powerful, everything is all knowing, when in actuality, for Greek and Roman gods, they were very flawed. They were much more human. They were very powerful, obviously. I don't know. I just, every single time I have seen gods portrayed in a film, like Greek gods, Roman gods, there is always someone complaining about the way they're portrayed.
Well, Bradley, let me
Yeah.
ask you this. Given the way that the spiritual landscape is in this country these days, do you feel that Nolan really didn't want to upset any modern sensibilities by including or even making the suggestions of gods in the Odyssey, just because maybe he felt it might offend someone who doesn't, who doesn't, adhere to any religious belief or even supernatural belief.
I don't necessarily know if that was his thought process. Hard to say. I don't know if he would have cared as much about the idea of not wanting to ruffle any feathers. I think he probably thought the story doesn't really need direct gods and goddesses in it. Whereas you could have a little bit of a hand wavy. There's the feeling of the gods. We feel Poseidon's presence in this film without him being in the film. We feel Athena's presence in the film, kind of quote unquote, without definitively seeing, the goddess Athena. I think he probably was like, you know what? I don't feel like I need it. I think probably more that than the one that the movie I think of is I think it's called The Immortals, the one with Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many people bitched about seeing the gods in that and the way they were portrayed because they were too human. I was like, I don't feel like you know very much about these characters. And that's just always something in my head, because then you see something like Clash of the Titans or Wrath of the Titans, and people are sort of hit and miss on those. For this, I honestly think he just didn't feel like he needed it, because it's also one of those things where if he had definitively shown one god in this, he would have had to show more. Like, he maybe would have felt like, okay, if I'm showing more than just the presence of one of them, the definitive form. I mean, Athena is the closest we get, but the form that she chooses to take, I think, was very appropriate. Beyond that, I don't feel like we needed any of it. That's just me. Obviously, big Poseidon fan, would have loved to have seen Poseidon here fucking shit up. Big fan of that. But I just don't really think, at least for me, I don't think it was necessary. Granted, if he had made a 5-hour film and put tons of gods and goddesses in it, I'd have been like, bring the trash bag of popcorn. Let's fucking do this. I'd have been so here for it.
Yep.
But yeah, for me, this film does a lot of trying to mix very deep personal and interpersonal character moments with the big and the bombastic. I personally think having gods and goddesses in this would have pushed it too far in that direction. But that's just me. It's hard to say without having seen what the final product would have been. But for me, I didn't really need any definitive gods or goddesses in this. I felt their presence anyway.
Thanks, Bradley. Brendan, I'll leave any final thoughts for you.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I see Luca's point about if you can include some of the fantastical elements, you should include all of the fantastical elements. But I don't know. It doesn't really bother me as much. I think going into a Nolan film and knowing what he's going to do with the Odyssey and how his filmmaking sensibility is normally, like, this is a guy who took Batman and tried to make it seem like it was grounded in logical realism for 3 movies.
I'm sorry, motherfucker. Did you say tried as if he didn't succeed? You know what? Stand still. I'm going to throw something at you.
Hey, no violence behind the scenes.
Of course, Nolan succeeded in doing so. But I mean, try in the sense of he's grounding Batman in reality. And there's something utterly unreal about a billionaire. It's in the same way that there is about Iron Man, where it's a guy building a suit of armor. There's a guy who's using his money to bankroll all of these clandestine materials to fight crime as a bat at night. There's something otherworldly about that in some way, but we're trying to make it real. I kind of like the way that he utilizes the gods, because granted, it's been a couple weeks since we watched it, but I feel like every time I remember like that somebody violating Zeus's law, the Xenia, there was always like some clap of thunder or something like that always reminded you of Zeus's presence in a way. Anytime something regarding Poseidon might have been happening. It was something on the sea, or the winds changed, or something of that nature. The implication of the gods worked for me more than showing the gods physically. If there was a way to take the Cyclops and Circe's magic and all of that and sort of ground it more in the reality, maybe he should have done that if he was going to go that way with the gods. It didn't bother me so much. I like the way that they did it, but that's just me. Again, I haven't read the Odyssey, so I don't. There are certainly things that I have read that I'm more of a purist about than the Odyssey because I haven't read it. So,
All right, thank you. Appreciate that, Brandon. Very fair. So, all right, cool. So, now that our really kind of our more fantastical part of the story is over, this is where I feel like everything is extremely grounded, right? So, very appropriate for after a 20-year journey to get back, right? So 10 years battling out in Troy, and then another 10 years trying to get back. So Odysseus lands back in Ithaca, right? And he first ends up meeting his half-blind servant Eumaeus, right? And as he's meeting Eumaeus, right, he finds out that some of the suitors are going to go and try to kill Telemachus, right? So Odysseus, before he can even really fix anything, he's like, well, shit. I guess I need to go save my son first, right? I already got enough stuff going on. First, let me deal with my kid, right? So he goes and he, saves Telemachus. And, it kind of made me think about it for a second, but it's like, oh yeah, Telemachus, he was really just a baby, right? So he doesn't even know his own father's face, right? Like he was just, a little 1-year-old, pooping his pants and everything when he was there, right? So for Telemachus, right, like he meets them, and well, Odysseus doesn't even need a disguise, right, to fool him because Telemachus has no idea, right? And it's not really Telemachus doesn't really understand what's going on until like he's bringing Odysseus up to his house, his castle, whatever we want to call it. His loyal dog Argos is just sitting there, right? And you see Odysseus get down close to Argos, and you start to see his like little tag wagon, right? And Luca knows we have a friend that we go see movies with, does not deal with animals dying very well. She was not, I jokingly was like, okay, it's time for you to close your eyes because you're not gonna like this part. Because it's always a part that happens, right? If you watch anything, we saw it in The Return, we see it in this. Poor Argos, right? His faithful doggy passes on right there, right? And this is where Telemachus is like, oh shit, you're my father, right? And I like how it just kind of like happens and he kind of goes with it, right? Like it's not like some huge run out thing, like, and it's weird, right? Because I think he wouldn't know how to react to that, right? Like if you just saw your father for the first time in 20 years, I'm sure you'd be like very conflicted by how you would feel emotionally in that situation, right? So it's just kind of like, we're going to kind of go with what's going on, right? So, he brings them to, another feast that's happening. Penelope meets with Odysseus, right, who's still in disguise. And this is where we kind of recount the rest of Troy, right? Because he has this very, I think, powerful monologue that he has that's both him recalling what he saw in Troy, right? And then also we see Athena, right? Not really the god Athena, right? But I guess Athena in disguise, or however we want to interpret that, right? Because I know Athena, like in the story, like she would change a whole bunch of different forms. At one point she was Mentor, but I think that, I don't think that this was Athena at all. It was just, him visualizing Athena. But I think there's this very poignant scene, right, where a disguised Odysseus is telling Penelope about everything that happened in Troy. And it is just, you could sense, right, the torture that he went through, right? Because for him, right, he created this Trojan horse, right? He created this Trojan horse. He's the one that brought into the city, and this Trojan horse led to the demise of Troy, right? Something that he created. And to me, it's something that 100% breaks Zeus's law, right? Zeus's law, a law that he's lived by, that it constantly talks about Zeus's law, treating, treating people with like travelers with respect, right? And what does he do? He deceives his host and causes the demise of this whole place, right? So you feel him going through that struggle. And then on the flip side, right, you see kind of the brutality of the war that's happening. And Bradley, I remember you talked about the brutality earlier. I actually feel like this depiction of the brutality was pretty tame in comparison. I remember watching another version of the Odyssey. I think it was Ulysses that I watched. And like they literally were just like sitting there, they're like burning places. And then you would see them like just like holding up like little babies and throwing them into burning buildings. Like it was horrifying to watch, right? So I think that they actually did kind of tame this down from the baby burning to something that was a little bit more palatable, right? But I thought it was so cool that Athena, right, who's played by Zendaya, right, she was really just this little girl that's brought up and just like beheaded in front of him, right? And I'm guessing that this is happening simultaneously. I believe that's Athena's statue that's also being beheaded at the same time. I don't know that. If anyone knows that, Luca, maybe you do. But that's what I kind of got the jive of. And I thought it was just a really impactful scene, right? Like just 20 years of anguish has been building up with this guy. And he comes home to see his home like totally destroyed, having to suffer from this PTSD of everything that he's gone through. And then I like the portrayal of Athena in this was just so cool to kind of see like, oh, it's him, you know, kind of embodying all that struggle that he's been through and everything that he saw. And really it's that one girl's death that sticks out in his head. And I just thought that this was fantastic. To me, this was the best part of the film for me, right, was that sequence. I just really love that scene. I wanted to see if you guys had anything you felt like or how you like that kind of sequence, because I feel like that was kind of Odysseus' big moment in this film before we get to all the bloodshed.
Yeah, I will say for me, Zendaya's character, I thought she was like a priestess of Athena. I was thinking that was why, at least for me, because the outfit that she was wearing to me looks like what I would think a priestess would look like.
I gotcha.
And the fact that she was right there, that was my thought. It could very well have just been a passerby. But yeah, I do like when we first see them, when we see them in the horse. I was gonna say there's one thing in the horse when the dude gets stabbed, and as they're pulling the blade out, someone else wipes the blood off. That is so fucking smart. Oh my god, that was so, because that would suck to be like, oh, there's blood in this horse. But that section was shown, the way that it was filmed and the sound editing was a bit scary, but it was mostly claustrophobic. It was just like, oh my god, there are people on top of people. When they come out of the horse, we see that bit in an earlier thing. It's an action sequence. Like when they're out and they're taking guys out, they're trying to open the gates. We finally see the gates open. The unit is there. That's all actiony. Here, it is horror. This is just, it is brutal. It's brutality. There is no levity in watching Troy burn. It is, like you had a really good point about, it's decades of just like anguish and fear. These guys have been here fighting for 10 years. This is the culmination of it. This is no longer warfare. It is just murder at this point. And it is horrific. And to see, the scene where he's up against Penelope's little midsection-y thing, and he's holding his hand out to Zendaya, and she's got tears, and then it changes perspective, and you see there's no one there, and you're like, oh fuck, dude, that's good. That's some good shit. I will say for me, that was the last great moment in the movie. I will admit I don't care for the end of this movie very much at all. But yeah, that the build up of that. I also will say when he washes up on the beach and Matt Damon is laying on his back with like no shirt on, you're like, fucking get it, Matt Damon. That dude's in shape.
I know, right? Damn,
like,
Matt Damon.
that was the one moment where I'm like, how old is this guy again? But yeah, the scene kind of leading up to that, I probably should have mentioned this in the last section, is when his ship was originally torn apart, and it's the last time that he sees his men. dude, the one through line of this guy is he wants to get home and he wants to protect his men. I mean,
Yeah.
even when she tells him earlier, like, I don't remember if it's Cersei that tells him that only you will survive, or if
Yep,
it
Cersei
was
does. Yep.
okay.
Mhm.
And even then, he's just like, he refuses to accept it, refuses to believe it, despite everything he is being told is coming true, point after point after point. It does just suck to see the culmination of, like, he knew there was some part of him that knew it was coming and still tried to fight it every step of the way. He tried everything he could to save him. But then, yeah, I love, oh my God, him making this freaking, it looks like you ordered a raft from Timu or Wish. It's worse than the one in Castaway. Like, a board of wood. And he's like, Poseidon will protect me. I'm like, Poseidon's gonna drown your ass for being a moron. But yeah, the way all of that stuff was shot, the transitions I thought was really great. And then yeah, his moment with Zendaya here I thought was excellent. The sacking of Troy. I will say I do like that any movie I've seen the sacking of Troy in, it does shift from an action piece to something much more horrific. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing that feels good about it. And I like that. I feel like if I ever saw a movie where they treated this as like, yeah, the good guys are winning, I would be like, no, you're stabbing people in their beds. That's not winning. That's bad. So I do really like, because I always think of, there's one thing I do love, mentioned earlier about Brian Cox and Troy. I love the scene in Troy where he is there and he's like, the camera's circling him and his arms are up and it's burning. He's like, yes, let Troy burn. You're like, yeah, that's the bad dude.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the bad. He's surrounded by fire. Obviously. But yeah, this one, I do really like the shift from the action to, once they open those doors, it is just, it's horror, it's murder, massacre. And then you just see all of that weighing on him. Just good shit, man. It is good. But yeah, once we get from here on out, I'm like, bleh, whatever. The end of the movie is whatever for me. I'm pretty over it. But this was the last, I think, really good scene of this movie.
Awesome. Luca.
Well, I mean, it's just him finally coming to terms because he's been running for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
So when he's confronted with that, he's got to ask himself, well, who exactly am I? Because he was a nobody, really. And he felt like a nobody when he came back to Ithaca. So when Penelope's asking him questions about the war, trying to find out what exactly happened and where Odysseus went, it's almost this identity crisis. Well, this is who Odysseus is, but do I really want to be that guy? And later on, when he actually, takes down the suitors, it's this role that feels the most familiar to him because he's been doing it for 10 years, right, outside the walls of Troy. And it's not an easy role to let go of. I mean, if you ever talk to guys who've come back from the combat zone, they can just they find it really, really hard to adjust to normal life because they're always on edge. They're always at the ready to get up and go. So for someone like Odysseus, he doesn't know how to go back to being a peacetime guy because that life for him is over. There's really no going back to that because he's been away from home for 10 years. Most of the people that he knows are gone. They've either died in front of the walls of Troy, or they're dead, either because of him or because of some decision that was made that kind of led to their deaths, right? So Odysseus is pretty much he has to confront and, more importantly, accept that this is what's happened to him, and then he can move on because because when Athena's popping up, it's her kind of prodding him and just saying, well, remember, this is what you did. You didn't do some pretty good things in Troy, so let that sink in. And when he does finally let that sink in, that's when we cease to see Athena pop up, because at that point he's come to make peace with with not only what he's done but who he is as a person, kind of accept that I can't really change what I did at Troy. All right, that's come and gone. What I can change is who I'm going to be going forward as a person, and maybe try to salvage his relationship with his wife, try to build a new relationship with the son that he's never met, and try to be the king that Ithaca deserves. Because I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of the good men who left Ithaca, they died and they're never coming back.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of people like, I'm sure I'm sure there are a lot of people in Ithaca like then, as in many wars have since come and gone. They've gathered at whatever gathering spot to just find out whatever happened to Antaeus, or whatever happened to Eumaeus, or whatever happened to Achilles. They just want to get news and try to have that resolution about what happened to their loved ones. And Odysseus is kind of ashamed of that because he knows exactly what happened to all these guys, but he just doesn't want to be the person to tell them, yeah, they ate the sun god's cattle, and yeah, they got drowned. I'm sorry about that.
They got murdered. Womp womp.
I kind of led them through this crevice where a six-headed monster ate your uncle. So yeah, but I'm back. That's great.
He died.
Right?
He died doing what he loved.
I wouldn't call it love, but yeah, sure.
All right, and Brendan.
Yeah. This is sort of the I think this is probably the best sequence in the film, is just sort of his homecoming and going through this sort of recounting of what happened to Troy. And it's the culmination of what Nolan is trying to say in this movie. And it's what makes it a really interesting companion piece to Oppenheimer. It's very much talking about how we can be the seeds of our own destruction and our own worst enemies in a lot of ways. Because the through line of the Sea People, Nolan's answer to the Sea People is that we are the Sea People ourselves. We are destroying our own civilization. The Bronze Age is ending because we keep bringing this disaster and destruction upon ourselves. So that's kind of where the horror of Troy is finding that we are bringing the horror amongst ourselves. I think this is probably the strongest sequence Matt Damon has in this entire movie, just recounting the story.
You guys all openly heard Brendan admit he was the villain in this story, right? I just want to throw that out there.
We're all the villain in our own stories.
I mean, listen, it's just like when Lee said dogs couldn't act when we did a trailer for reaction for Heart of the Beast. So
That's true. And then the little doggo was like,
oh yeah. And let's
totally
not forget. Brendan also said he enjoys watching people getting murdered too.
That's right.
Okay,
Catholicism is strong.
We'll take me out of context all we want. Let's go.
We're not having to do much there, but sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue.
I completely lost the thread of my thought now.
Oh, come on. You were talking about you were the villain in your own story. Sorry, I got too chaotic too fast. You're talking about how that was your favorite shot in the film.
Yeah, the sequence of Troy is just very well done. It's very horrific, as Bradley said before. I think it was Athena's statue, because I think what Troy does is they bring the horse in and they bring it to the temple of Athena because it's a shared god between the two of them, if I remember my story of Troy together.
Yeah, that's right. Because in one of the stories, as long as Troy has the shield of Athena, it can never be defeated. So Odysseus actually has to sneak into Troy, steal the shield of Athena, and get it out of Troy, so that Troy is going to be vulnerable after that.
Yeah. I will also say another remarkably smart thing. I mentioned how smart it was to wipe the blood off the sword tip. When they drop the panel off the horse, they have it on ropes and they catch it before it hits the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really smart, man. This movie does a really good job of showing just how smart some of these guys are. Sometimes they're dumb, but also smart.
I think it's Odysseus who actually reaches up and wipes the sword off, which is to show how clever he is. Yeah.
Oh, smart, man.
So.
What I think is dumb is you see the sword enter like 3 spots behind that guy, then 2 spots behind that guy, and then it stabs that guy. I'm like, if I'm that guy, am I not turning and being like, hey guys, do you guys hear a sword somewhere? Like, lean down, dude.
Yeah, dude was standing up the whole time, so he probably should
Yeah.
have maybe recoiled a little bit there. And
I mean,
actually,
it kind of makes you wonder just how smelly that horse was. You know, if they're
oh
been
yeah,
there for
dude,
days.
Bro,
yeah.
have you guys heard anything about them filming it? It
No, I
was
haven't.
so there was that section, and then everything on the ship. The ship was had these like water cannons on the side to constantly like throw water up and make it look like they were in the waves. And Matt Damon was like, this water was supposed to be warm. Well, I guess no one told the damn water it was freezing cold. So they were in their first day in the horse. John Bernthal is on the bottom of it, and he's up to his waist in water, and he's shivering. And Matt Damon was like, everyone was like, John, are you good? John's like, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's get this going. Let's go. And he was like, bro, he like set the bar for the level of complaint people were allowed to do during this shoot process.
I mean, the Punisher took a lot of punishing. So,
dude, I was like, I wouldn't piss off the Punisher. You shitting me? But it was the fact that the horse was just from a shooting standpoint, because Christopher Nolan wants to do everything as realistically as possible. They were like, it became an absolute nightmare where it was just because John Bernthal did the movie Fury, where it was the tank crew, and he has talked about you spend that much time close to that many guys. He's like, I know every smell every one of those guys is capable of making at this point. And he said it was a surprisingly similar thing with the horse, just because it was so many people, so cramped. It took them way too many shots to get what they wanted to. And he's like, I think they filmed that first. I think he said that was very, very early in the process, where it was just freezing fucking cold. Everyone's like, let's do it, for the love of God, let's just get this done. Can you imagine if they had gotten done with that and Nolan was like, we got to reshoot some of the horse bits? Bernthal be like, the fuck you do. That again. But yeah, they were really good shot.
Yeah. It does. Now I have way too many questions about what life was like inside the Trojan horse as far as filming goes. Yeah, that adds a lot more to it. So,
oh god.
But yeah, so we have the kind of this discussion between Penelope and Odysseus, still in disguise, right? One of his like nurses or like nursemaid or whatever also recognizes him at this stage because of the scars on his legs, which I thought was nice. That I love how there's like a lot of that where you see the character's emotions showing what's happening, right? Like she's coming to realization. She just say like, "Oh my God, you're Odysseus." She just like looks at him, and you see like her happy. You just see her start to smile, and he like looks at her like, "No, don't say it." And I love little things like that, right? Because there's so many times where we have to be hit over the head with something. Those minor moments are nice to see. Like, oh, holy shit, I get it now. So, after Penelope gets done talking with the shrouded Odysseus, right? She orders all the suitors to gather the dining hall because she's going to announce her new husband, right? And she has all the people make sure that all the weapons were moved and everything like that. Penelope devises a task that the suitors have to do in order to, become the new king, right? And they have to string Odysseus's bow and then shoot it between these axe heads. And by doing so, that would win her hand. In the most expected thing ever, all the suitors go up, they try. I like how Antinous doesn't even bother, right? Like, he just knows, like, look, I'm a piece of shit, right? Like, I know it. I'm not going to be able to do this, right? I'm not going to be able to make it. So, but then we have, obviously, the shrouded Odysseus. He strings it up. They do it a little bit different, right? Because in the actual book and what they do in the return is he, like, kind of holds it over fire. To kind of make it more malleable or make it bend some more.
Yeah.
So I thought that was something you could have just thrown an extra 10 seconds in, but I don't know, whatever. But it was a minor thing that did kind of bug me why they didn't bother with that part, because it is kind of a big thing. So, but Odysseus does string the bow, and he shoots through the arrows. And I like how that one actor kind of slowly comes to the realization that, oh, you're Odysseus, and he just gets shot in the neck. Like, It's just like that quickly, right? Like this is his moment of surprise, and this is where really the all-out brawl happens, right? And we kind of see a whole bunch of shit happening. I'm not gonna annotate everything that happens in the fight sequence, but
You know who does though? Robert Pattinson.
yes, that's right. Attenuous does a great job of explaining every time that shields, swords, and pole arms or the poles are dropping down through the hole in the ceiling. So yes, we do get some play-by-play there by Attenuous, right? But Odysseus, he ends up slaughtering a lot of the suitors, right? Other suitors kind of just kneel before him, being like, "Look, I ain't about this life, right? Like, I'm not gonna be killed for this." And then there's kind of that nice sequence at the end, right, where he quickly battles Attenuous, right, and then he puts the little totem in the mouth and stabs him and kills him, be like, "Yeah, tell Sinon, blah blah blah." And tell the rest of my soldiers that I'm gonna go do this stuff. So it has this very I would say cathartic ending, right? One where it's just like you really build up the hatred for Attenuous, right?
Yeah.
He is absolutely a terrible, terrible person, almost a cartoonish way, right?
Yeah.
And he gets his death, and obviously, I don't think many people are like, "Oh God, no, not Attenuous." I love that guy, right? Everyone was just like, I could imagine the cheers in the audience as he was murdered there, So an injured Odysseus, after everything happens, he finally gets a chance to meet Penelope face to face, right? And then we have this ending sequence here where Telemachus is now the king of Ithaca, right? Penelope and Odysseus, who is alive, right? Which, I mean, he is alive in the other one, but it was definitely like trying hard to play up like he was gonna die, and he's like, "Nah, bitch, I'm just injured. Don't worry about it." So it's you have both Penelope and Odysseus sailing away into exile. They're also going out there to pay retribution to all the soldiers that have perished along the way, right? Because that was kind of a deal that he had with Sinon when he met him in Hades. So, and that's the end of the film, right? Really a 3-hour-long film. I know a lot that was cut off and everything, and I guess who's brave and wants to start with grading this, right? Who's gonna be the first one with some final thoughts?
I definitely have thoughts about the final scene.
Okay, Bradley, let's start with that first. Yeah, I'm sorry, absolutely. Let's go ahead and start with that first before we get to final thoughts.
The first thing I was going to say is I don't know how familiar you guys are with recurve bows, but there's a very interesting fact that when a lot of these guys are trying to string his bow, they're doing it backwards. So
Ew.
the bow has a little bit of, I don't want to say a U shape, but you see how it looks like the point in the middle goes like out. You actually have to turn it backwards from where that is. That's where the power of the bow comes from. So
kind of like with the Mongolian bows, right?
Oh yeah, exact same thing. And a lot of the guys in this, they're trying to string it. And in my mind, I'm like, that's especially dumb because you're bending it the way it's already supposed to go, and you're still too weak to do it. That's pathetic. Because if they could have strung it, they'd be like, wow, this string is not long enough, or you'd go to pull it back and it would just slide off, or it would have no power. All the power of the bow comes from the shape of the bow. So a lot of them are even trying to do that backwards. There is an interesting sound cue that they have a few times in this where Odysseus will pull the string of his bow back a bit and let it go. And it's like a big, almost like a harp thrum sound to it. So I like that they do that just enough that you remember it. So then when he does it, Penelope is like, "Oh shit, that's my man."
I mean, Ralph finds it the same thing in The Return, also.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a cool little sound cue thing.
Agreed.
Freaking God, Tom Holland's character is supposed to build up to having this cool heroic moment, and he gets his ass whooped by that dude for like 9 minutes. Odysseus is murdering men by the dozens, and Spider-Man is getting his ass whooped upstairs. I'm like, okay. Because when he finally gets up there, you're like, oh, he's going to stop him. Hell no, he doesn't. That other dude wallops him like 4 times, and then finally Tom Holland kills him. I'm just like, God, dude, seriously. The fight at the end, look, I know that he is a war hero, and I know that all the other guys here are green, but there's like 100 of them. It's
Yeah.
just him. They could have swamped him in 8 seconds. What the fuck was your plan, Odysseus? Like, it's just this is one of those things that you do have to let rule of cool exist, and you have to be like, okay, yeah, him having the bow, him obliterating them super fast is really cool. But at the same point in time, I'm like, dude, look, I play D&D. I know how action economy works. You put 99 guys against one, unless that one dude has anime powers, he ain't coming out on top.
It's true.
Yeah, but it's ultimately it is whatever. The one thing I really do like in the fight scene is you had mentioned that there are people that are kneeling. Um, any other movie, I feel like what would have happened is Odysseus would kill a lot of them. He would kill Robert Pattinson. He would turn around. There'd be a dramatic moment, and that's when everyone would kneel. That's not what happens. I like that there are people, even midway through the fight, that are like, that's King Odysseus. And there's either a certain level of, that's our king returned, I'm kneeling in respect, versus that dude is murdering the shit out of everyone and I don't want to be a target, so they're kneeling. It's a really cool visual that
Yeah.
people are kneeling mid-fight while some other people are still fighting. That I was very unique. I don't know that I've seen that before. That really took me by surprise, despite the fact I didn't like this is how it ended. I wanted there to be a bit more of a plan, but I did really like the idea of and the image of them kneeling mid-fight. I thought that was cool. And then even when I saw his injuries towards the end, I was like, okay, at least one of those one of those arrows he took was in a very lethal spot, but it's fine. It's whatever. And then I was also going to ask, I don't know, the idea of him sailing west to honor his men. Does it ever say anything in the like what he's going to do? Like
I mean, Telemachus actually is the one who goes off to go find himself in the story. I think the only other story in literature where Odysseus decides to go sailing is in Dante's Inferno, where Dante invents a story where Odysseus decides, you know what, I'm just going to keep sailing, and he sails past the Strait of Gibraltar all the way to the southern hemisphere where he sees Mount Purgatory, and that's when his ship gets swept by the waves and sunk to the bottom of the sea, and then Odysseus ends up in the 8th circle of hell as a result, because he's guilty of bad counseling.
Yeah.
I just talk about this like Lord of the Rings. They're just going to Valinor, right? They're just he's just going out somewhere. So
Yeah, it's such a small gripe. I wish I knew just a little bit more. And it's one of those things where it could have been 1 or 2 additional lines of dialogue where I would be a little clear about what the fuck he's doing. I mean,
Bradley,
the last time
remember they made a reference at the beginning where where they were talking about before he goes off to Troy, he and Penelope actually talk about, they just we just want to just sail off into the westward sea and not look back. Something to that effect.
That part I get. If that had been the only thing, I'd be okay with it. But then when he is told to go west to honor his men, I'm like, is he going to do something? Is there a shrine he needs to build? Is he just going to go bang in Hathaway in the west? Because if so, I will take one for the fucking team, and I will go to the west.
Sinon did say in it, like he said, like gave specific instructions for how to honor the men when he was talking with Sinon. So said something like, oh, you have to go to like this spot where like nobody knows anything, and you have to like just like slaughter, I don't know, 2 sheep or some shit like that. They always slaughtering animals in this. But Sinon did explain why he needed to do what he did. It was to honor his men that he never got a chance to bury.
I thought there was an implication that he was going back almost to where the underworld was in that way to honor them. I don't know.
Well, that sucks. Yeah, I will say have you watched this the second time, Brendan? Okay, I was gonna say we've only seen it once, so I'm like, you know what? I might be bitching about something that on a second watch I'd be like, okay, I get it now. But yeah, I do like also the fact that he has to be the one being the aggressor in the fight, not his son. so that he can be the one to take the exile and let. I like how his name's Telemachus. I have called him Spider-Man. I've called him Tom Holland the entire time. But yeah, the Spider-Man can remain king. I like that, and I do think it's a genuine, like, happy story ending in a good way. But yeah, I don't know, just it bubbling over to the big fight scene for me just didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just me. I still thought it was a great film, but yeah, that last part bothered me. I think Brendan and I feel differently about this though.
No, I was just gonna say, here, son, have this crown as our civilization is collapsing. Have fun. So,
I'm gonna go bang your super hot mom in the West.
um,
Maybe I will stumble upon Charlize Theron again. Who knows if I get lucky enough?
Oh my god. That's the paradise right there. We got a lot of lotus flowers and 2 hot babes. Let's do this.
yeah, I don't know. There are some issues with the choreography of the final fight. Like Bradley was saying, but I think part of that is just Luca. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't he fight off that many people pretty much single-handedly at the end of the Odyssey?
I mean, he has help from Eumaeus and several other people as well. So
okay,
it's not like he's doing this all solo, really.
Okay, yeah, it beggars a little bit the disbelief, like Bradley was saying. I do get what Nolan was trying to go for with trying to make sure that Telemachus is not in any way violating the Xenia issue, so that he can remain and be king and all that. That being said, there's the debate about whether or not even Odysseus is violating Xenia, because the suitors themselves violated Xenia beforehand. But I don't know. I'm not
just trying to say Xenia as much as you possibly can in one sentence.
I'm not schooled enough in Homeric text to.
I mean, listen, when you learn something new, you want to use it as much as you can. All right, so leave them alone.
That's fair.
But yeah, that's really all I've got. Like, it was a decent sequence. It could have used a little bit better choreography, in my opinion, just to sort of help the logical over a little bit. But overall, I think it's fine. It's a fine ending. I think the emotional high point is that final scene where you get Odysseus recounting Troy to Penelope. So
yeah, at that stage, the violence is always there. I think it's just, there for the sake of violence at the end. Obviously, it's like him dealing with all the pent up rage he has, but it definitely never felt like it was always the brightest or the best moment of it. So, Luca, any other before we get into the final thoughts? So,
I mean, everything was sort of evenly paced at the beginning, but as you're getting closer and closer to the end, no one's like, "Shit, I gotta get through this as much as I can." That's a feeling that I got, and thank God, because by that point, it's like nobody really gives a shit about the suitors anymore. You just want to, because you know what's going to happen. You just want to, you're trying to get Nolan to hit fast forward to get to that part, and then once that part's done, you're like, okay, well, I'm done. I'll go wait in the car for everybody else,
Gotcha. All right. Any other random thoughts before we get to the final thoughts, right? Because I didn't mean to cut off everyone in there. Want to make sure we all have had our say before we get into our overall grades for this.
I'm good.
All right. Okay. Who's gonna be the first of us, right? That is gonna give it a final grade.
Well, I will be the last of us, so
I'll be first. I got this.
Okay.
I will say that I really like Nolan. I don't think I've seen a film of his yet that I did not in some ways enjoy. Some of them I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, Inception, I was like, yeah, whatever. But
that was Tenet for me.
I haven't seen Tenet yet, but I've heard that enough that I'm a little hesitant.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the cast is incredible. Obviously, the story is really good. I really do like the characters. I like a lot of the writing. The sound editing just continued to floor me time and time again. Not a perfect film. There were some issues. I definitely do feel like what Luca was saying, where towards the end it gets a little like we almost sped up a bit because it's just like, okay, the film's got to be done. We can't spend as much time on everything as we did in the beginning. But I still really like it. I think we do like 10-point scales. 1 to 10.
We normally do 5, right?
Yeah.
So 5.
Yeah, it's usually 5 just because that's the way it is in the editor. So
Got it. I would say somewhere between the 3.5 and a 4. So I'd say like 3.75. It's one of those movies where the stuff that I really liked. The stuff I disliked was kind of, whatever, forgettable. I would be very interested to watch this a second time to see how my opinion of this would change, because this is one I've only seen once. But yeah, I think a solid 3.5 would be good. There are some things I would change, but overall I still really enjoyed it.
Awesome, thank you, Brendan. If you don't mind going second, because I'll be third, because Luke already called last. So
Yeah, no problem. I had a thing where I was when we watched this movie, where I was sitting with it and I was remembering actually how I felt at the end of Oppenheimer when we watched it for the first time, because I remember when we watched Oppenheimer, I just sat there in like stunned silence as the credits rolled for like 5 minutes, and then I just dropped an F-bomb because like it hit so well. Like that.
That is the best film review I've ever seen from Brendan. Is we sat there and I was like, I'm not going to say a word. I'm going to see what he says. And finally done, he just goes, fuck. And I laughed so hard I thought I was going to wet myself. Best film review of all time.
But so that's kind of, it seems, especially with Nolan films, that's kind of where I find myself going when I watch one, is like, where is it on that scale for me? Like, does it make me think? How does it make me feel? This movie is pretty good. Like, technically and filmmaking wise, it is a phenomenal achievement to me. Story wise and such, it leaves a little bit to be desired, especially in the pacing and some of the writing. I have a few issues with the script and the editing overall. I would probably lean about a 3.5, 3.7, somewhere in that range as well. It's not my favorite Nolan film. I don't think it's his best Nolan film by a landslide. But I think it's maybe in the top half of his films. The technicals really put it over the top for me. I really would like to. We only saw this on our local theater at a regular screen. I'd really like to see this one in IMAX.
Yeah, I forgot to mention we did not see this at IMAX. I checked and it was just sold out forever.
Yes. Yep.
So we just went and saw it. I also will say when we saw it, it was like 12:20 on like a Thursday. Surprising number of people there. We were the youngest people there by probably 30 years. And I told Brendan, I'm like, you know why they're all here? They remember when this story took place. They were all there, Brendan. Oldest movie audience I've ever been a part of.
But yeah, 3.5 to 3.7. I think it's a very good movie. It's not Nolan's best. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm not gonna go into too much over what you guys are talking about as far as like the scoring goes, because I think I gotta echo very similar stuff to what you're saying. So I think the first time I watched this, and I guess I'm gonna have a little random story for this as I wrap up my review. There was so much discourse around this film before it came out, right? Occasionally it happens, right? But I will say that it'd been a while since I remember a film that got lambasted so much over, to me, things that were either totally minor or had very little impact on what actually was happening, right? And I would urge people, right, when we're watching reviews or we're watching, trailers for stuff, right? Like, nobody should sit there and harp on stuff without actually seeing what the movie's like, because I think too many people made a prior judgment before going into it. And now we continue to see all this ridiculous discourse over things that should just never happen, right? Helen of Troy, which I don't even know if we even mentioned Helen of Troy in the review, right? Because I think maybe Bradley, you mentioned Lupita's acting briefly,
Yeah,
right?
I mentioned her when going through the cast list,
Yes.
but yeah, she's another Elliot Page situation where so many people
Yeah.
bitched about them, and they're in the
Yeah.
film for God knows how long.
Yeah, I think
But
actually the second time I watched it, I did a stopwatch. Both of them were on screen combined for less than 6 minutes.
yeah, and when you mentioned the discourse, there are a lot of things I've seen in the discourse even after the film came out where I'm like, in reading what you're complaining about, I can tell you haven't seen the movie.
Yeah.
Because you're complaining about things that either weren't in the movie or were in the movie and were answered, and you're like, well, why didn't they? They did. It's right there. You just haven't seen it because you're too busy being a bitch. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, between just the actors and actresses playing these roles that were extremely minor, that's why I mentioned the modern dialogue very early on, because that was another thing that a lot of people harped on. And then it got to the point where it just felt like every time someone mentioned something, it was something ridiculous. Like, I remember watching something where they're like, I can't believe they use like a Viking ship in this film, right? Like, geez, like, I can't watch this. I'm like, oh my God, is this how we've gone so far from just watching a movie for the sake of watching the movie? And I'm not going to lie, I think all that vitriol, it really did make me, it gave me pause the first time I watched it, right? And I'm going to be very honest about that, because I think I spent so much time trying to figure out like what he did or did not do well, and what did he include or not include from the Odyssey. There was who he was using as the interpretation. Oh, she was feminist, and then like the lady came out afterwards and said, I don't like this, and it's like, okay, now I don't know what people are gonna complain about now, because the person they're complaining about that did the translation, she didn't even like it. So where do we go from there? And there was just so much around it that I remember watching it and being like, this was pretty good, but I don't know how much I'm old. Like, I just felt like stuff was missing, right? And I think if I just watched it the first time, I actually probably would have been around maybe a 3.5, right? That's honestly how I felt. So I went, right, a few days, actually on Friday, 2 days ago from recording, I went and I watched it again, right? And I try to just watch it from a story, right? I try to take out my, knowledge about the Odyssey, right? And I just try to focus on, did he tell a good story, right? Because yes, he absolutely did make some decisions on what he wanted to include and not include. And it's his vision of what it should be like. And I wanted to just look at it based upon how it was, right? And as I look back on it, there are things that I think, needed to be kind of done better, right? I think I really actually enjoyed the non-linear storytelling in this aspect, because not only is that similar to Odyssey, it's also very much a key thing for him, and it allows us as an audience to kind of discover things like the fall of Troy at the very end, where I think if you show that too early, it ruins the payoff. And this, it makes sense to do that. So there were aspects of this I enjoyed, right? And I think to each of the trials it goes through, there were some things, I liked Polyphemus, right? I liked his thing, but him being nonverbal kind of bugged me. I think the other thing that I got really challenged with was, I think if you're trying to create this grounded story where you're just focusing on Odysseus and you're just focusing on kind of his journey, right? You want him to have more of these connections with people. And that was something where I knew he cared about his crew. I don't think we spent enough time with him, like conversing, getting to know, like being a part of the crew to make me feel like there was a good payoff for that. I did like the sequence at the end where the ship is getting destroyed, and he's on one side of the ship and his second-hand man got knocked out, right? And you see him just screaming something, but because the waves are so like heavy and the thunder's all going on, he can't hear anything, right? So he's sitting there saying something to this guy that, by all accounts, that they've been fighting together for a decade, and he can't even say goodbye to him in an effective way because the gods are interfering with it, right? Which I thought was so soul crushing. But on that same token, I would have loved to see more of that type of bond being created with the crew, right? So I think that there was a huge opportunity there that was missed.
The only thing I will say about that is keep in mind, he's already been fighting with these guys for a decade.
Yeah, that's true. That's
so
true.
if now the counterpoint to your point is we did see when he was recruiting people, we saw flashbacks to that. We could have had something there. There was the room for it. If we had seen that later on, it would have been weird to be like, "Oh, hey, Bill, it's nice to meet you." I'm like, you guys were basically inside of each other in a horse 5 minutes ago. Like, it'd be weird to have like a team building type thing. But no, I do definitely agree that trying to create more of an emotional attachment to them would have made them a little less
red shirty.
Yeah, literally, it's to the point that when the Asian guy dies, I'm like, oh shit, I recognize him because he's the only Asian guy on the group. I recognize the second in command, and then I maybe recognize 2 others. Beyond that, they're pretty much nameless, faceless. Oh, they got grabs. So yeah, again, my counterpoint to the counterpoint of your point, there was room for it. It would have had to have happened earlier.
Yeah, and I think that's where you have to figure out where you're going to put the focus on, and I think that's always the challenge in this, because I like how you said if it was 5 hours, you would just include stuff, and I 100% agree, right? Like, I think that there's opportunity for that. It's just you have to find a balance somehow for that. So I think that would have helped with it, because I think not having the gods like specifically involved with it, it does allow you to kind of get rid of certain aspects of the story, like the Phaeacians, right? So these characters were kind of. That's actually where he recounts everything. Is it Nausicaa, right, Luca?
Yeah.
And that's where he's actually recounting all the stories. So they kind of changed that to being Calypso's island, where he's recounting everything when that's not what happened. So I think he made these choices. Are they the same choices I would make? Maybe not, right? But I get that the focus is more on Odysseus, and there's certain things that you have to kind of trim out to do that, right? And I think that when I look at this, right, the fact that you include Sinon, to me, is what helps with kind of Antinuous's whole kind of story, because it adds that extra oomph for the audience that, hey, we really hate that guy, and because he's so slimy, I want that guy to die extra hard, right? So I feel like he purposely chose these things to kind of create kind of this better narrative that focus more on Odysseus, where there's kind of good and bad. So with all that rambling done, right, I think I'm going to end up giving this a 3.9 out of 5, right? I think the first time I watched it, it was lower. The second time I watched it, where I allowed me just to kind of enjoy everything, kind of see this stuff, I saw so many people complaining that, oh, Odysseus is so dumb in this. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we see loads of circumstances about him using his wit and knowledge. And it just felt like after a while, people just were saying shit to say shit. But I think at the end of the day, I feel pretty comfortable with 3.9. I agree. This is probably not on the Mount Rushmore of Nolan films, but I think it did enough to create this really hard to put together story in 3 hours, and did it in a meaningful way with some great casting. I think some really powerful moments, and some actors where they just kind of let them act and just let them own the scenes that they're in. So. That's my final grade. So, Luca, I will let you wrap it up, man. You are bringing us home. You're the anchor.
Lee, if this movie had been directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, would you still say that this was a good movie?
I mean, if he kept the same elements in, then yeah.
Okay. I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. I think this was a bridge too far for Nolan. I mean, I don't think it's one of his best, and I think he was just trying to do everything all at once, and it just came crashing down. It's kind of like Icarus just flying too close to the sun. So, Lee, another thing I wanted to ask you too. So now that we have reviewed this movie and we have taken a look at The Return, what is your overall assessment now that you've seen the Odyssey twice and you've seen The Return and we've talked about this?
Yeah, are you asking which one I like more?
Well, which one do you like more? Which one do you feel kind of best told the story of Odysseus?
Well, okay, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's the question I told you to think about.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, so I still feel like I like the Odyssey more because it told more of the story, right? And I feel like we're kind of comparing apples to oranges because the Return only deals with his time in Ithaca, right? Like we're almost comparing like, hey, we're trying to tell one part of the story that you have a full length movie to do compared to the Odyssey, where you're trying to wrap up a lot of different things, right? Like one's an epic, one is a small part of his journey. So I think if I was to compare the two, now Ralph Fiennes, and I'm sorry, who was the actress that played Penelope in The Return?
Juliette Binoche.
Juliette Binoche, thank you. They did phenomenal in that. Like, I absolutely love them. And I think that if we were to have them in this movie, I wonder how much more I would have liked it because they totally nailed their scenes. But I also feel like if you have 2 hours to spend with these characters, you have a lot more time to do that. Because while the Odyssey, well, it definitely has some issues with kind of the pacing, which I think a lot of people brought up. I think those are very fair arguments, right? Because there's times where I feel like he's hitting the fast forward button and he's just trying to move through the story. Whereas I feel like if I'm thinking of The Return, there was times where everything just felt so drawn out. Like it just felt so at times the pacing just dropped to a glacier pace. And it's one of those films where even though the acting is superb in it, I just felt like the story just didn't gel, right? Like I think Telemachus in particular, I was not a fan of in The Return, where I liked him more in the Odyssey. So I think if I'm looking at the two, I think at least Nolan takes a shot at adapting the Odyssey in its fair entirety, whereas The Return is just like, hey, we're just going to focus on this part in Ithaca, but that part to me led more to be desired. Just because, like I said, I felt like they spend a lot of time there and maybe there's just not enough like to work with when you're doing that type of stuff. And I guess that's kind of my kind of thoughts if I'm comparing the two different movies where I feel like they're kind of attacking two different things.
So would you just make the same argument when comparing Ridley Scott's Napoleon with Sergei Bondarchuk's Waterloo?
I don't know because I haven't seen Elite. Well, I couldn't say. So I don't know. I remember watching Waterloo some time ago. I don't recall what that is. And once again, right, I mean, I watched Napoleons and I feel like they just didn't really do a good job with anything. So I think that, you know, we're comparing two different things that one could do it better than the other one, right? Like, so if Napoleon is more of a story of his life and that's more close to the Odyssey, like, at least I feel like Nolan did a better job of showing us the Odyssey than I think Ridley Scott did showing us Napoleon's life. But to compare it to Waterloo, I'd have to watch Waterloo again. It's been too long since I watched it, so I can't really.
Just because near the end of Napoleon, we do get to see the Battle of Waterloo. So,
sorry, I like I said, unfortunately, I don't remember enough about Waterloo. So,
well, that's something we'll have to take a look at. Then we'll put it on the list. Lee, why don't you go and take us out?
Yeah, no, man, I cannot believe we've been here for 3.5 hours. So, man, I want to really thank Bradley and Brendan, obviously. For hanging out with us all this time. This was quite a big thing to talk about, right? Obviously, you know, the Odyssey being one of the most iconic one of the most iconic stories that's ever been told, and you know, seeing an adaptation or trying to put it on the big screen was a lot to deal with. So I want to thank you guys so much for doing that. Definitely, you know, make sure anyone that's watching this, please subscribe to them. Luca, could you please put that in there? I would love to, you know, get more people involved with this because it was such a fun thing to talk about with you guys. And I want to thank really everyone for listening to us as we went through this, because it was a lot to go through, and I appreciate everyone for hanging out with us and learning about the Odyssey. So I would love to get some, comments from people. How did you like this? How did this maybe compare to, some of the other Odyssey movies that are out there, right? Thinking to some of the older ones like Ulysses and some of the other ones that were, kind of two-part miniseries and everything. So we've seen a lot of adaptations. I wonder what people's favorite is, and what did Nolan do well or not do well, right, in this story? Because there's definitely a lot of different thoughts out there for that. So I'm very curious to see what the rest of the audience thinks about. So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.